Chapter 246. Sect Masterly. I wonder which sect do you think this sword-seeking peak should be handed over to? When you purposely asked. Hearing this, that person thought that he had already agreed to hand over sword-seeking peak, and instantly smiled even more proudly. Hall Master 1. In the current cultivation world, Clearflower Sect is the strongest. Moreover, Sect Master Zhao of Clearflower Sect has a late-stage nascent soul cultivation. It is more appropriate for Clearflower Sect to be in charge. When you look towards the silent Clearflower Sect Master Zhao Yang on the right, Sect Master Zhao also feels that sword-seeking peak should be handed over to Clearflower Sect. Zhao Yang smiled and said slowly, "If the sects trust me and feel that Clearflower Sect can take on this heavy responsibility, then this Zhao will naturally not shirk." He had a humble expression, and the other sects became even more resolute, each of them having a confident expression that they should give him. The more when you heard, the angrier he got. This was obviously something that Clearflower Sect had discussed with the other sects, and was just using the sword-seeking conference to bring it up, forcing him to agree. In the past, he really had no way to refute, and under pressure, he had no choice but to agree, but now, he laughed coldly. The angrier he got, the calmer his expression became. Sect Master Zhao is right. A place as important as sword-seeking peak indeed requires sufficient strength to guard it. Otherwise, it will be extremely easy to fall into the schemes of heretic practitioners and vile people. He intentionally emphasized the word vile people and swept his gaze across the crowd. However, when he saw that everyone looked indifferent, he felt even more disdain in his heart. "Don't worry, Hall Master 1, Zhao Yang said with a solemn expression. "Our sect will definitely do our best to guard this sword-seeking peak. I naturally believe in Sect Master Zhao's strength, but..." When Yu's tone changed, and his expression became awkward. "Hall Master 1, why don't you speak your mind? To tell you the truth, a few days ago, a senior of our sect who had been in seclusion for many years suddenly came out. She is also extremely skilled in the art of refining artifacts, and wants to refine a weapon that suits her." When Yu sighed, "I saw that her aptitude was exceptional, and did not want to lose such a talent, so I handed the key to sword-seeking peak to her. Currently, this sword-seeking peak is still in her hands. If Sect Master Zhao really wants to share our sect's burden, you have to ask her first." Zhao Yang frowned. This was obviously Wen Yu's excuse, and he could not help but feel some anger. The sect leaders of the other sects who were standing by the side couldn't take it anymore and stepped forward to criticize. "Who is it? Call her out and we'll reason with her." "Exactly." With a single glance, everyone had a constipated face, as though they had just swallowed shit. With a flip of her palm, a small sword that was as thick as a fingertip floated in her palm. "It seems like everyone has a lot of opinions towards me managing Sword-Seeking Mountain. Oh well, if you feel that you're more suitable, then try your best to look for me to take this eye-opening key." How could the crowd dare to take it? Wasn't this clearly offending a demigod stage practitioner? They would be blasted into smithereens, right? One after another, they expressed that this was just a misunderstanding, and could not help but blame Clearflower Sect who instigated the various sections. "Since that's the case, then I shall keep this key." She was just wondering why old man Wen Yu insisted on giving her the key yesterday. So it was to slap their faces at this moment. Seeing that she did not pursue the matter, the crowd heaved sighs of relief. But Zhu Yao's tone changed. "It's too troublesome to open Sword-Seeking Mountain once every 10 years, and I don't have the time to keep waiting to open the door for you either. So, the timing of this Sword-Seeking Mountain has to be changed. In the future, it will be opened once every 50 years. Everyone's faces instantly darkened. What was the meaning of going for wool and coming home shorn? This was it. Yet, they were in the wrong in the first place, so it was not good for them to refute her. They could only glare at the culprit, Clearflower Sect, with resentful eyes. Sect Master Zhao's heart felt even more stifled. The pressure of a demigod stage was still present on his body, so it was already incredible that he was able to stand properly. How could he still have the mood to care about the feelings of the various sects? Hence, a fair and above-board resource-snatching assembly was left unsettled under Zhu Yao's half-coercion and half-threat. Putting aside the fact that the various sects did not manage to gain any benefits, the sword-seeking mountain that was supposed to be held once every 10 years was even changed to once every 50 years. They basically could not feel any more stifled. If no one has any objections, today's sword-seeking assembly shall begin. When you walked out, and basically did not give the others any time to react, he looked at Zhu Yao gratefully and said, "Old ancestor, please open the sword-seeking mountain's formation." Zhu Yao nodded. She did not have the patience to fight with this group of people either. She immediately brought the crowd and flew towards the mountain peak that was completely pitch black in color. Only after taking a closer look did she realize that this sword-seeking mountain was more like a spiritual or mine. However, what was produced inside was not spirit stones, but various materials used to refine artifacts. Various formations were laid down on the entire mountain peak. At first glance, it looked like a slightly ugly mountain, but after taking a closer look, one would realize that the surroundings of the mountain were filled with floating talismans. Zhu Yao was a little surprised at the formation techniques of this world. They seemed to be extremely profound. The large group of people stopped at the foot of the mountain. Zhu Yao injected a strand of spiritual energy into the key in her hand, and in an instant, the key emitted a dazzling golden glow, flying straight towards the mountain peak. A moment later, the entire mountain shook like a three-dimensional image, and then the illusory image flashed, revealing its true appearance. Different from the pitch-black, scorched mountain from before, in front of them was actually a mountain filled with various mystic tools and spiritual swords. There were even quite a few spiritual swords dancing in the air in the surroundings. The spiritual artifacts of Sword-Seeking Mountain are for those who are fated to obtain them. "Everyone, please enter." When you loudly said, only then did the disciples of the various sects walk into the mountain with excited expressions. In this Sword-Seeking Mountain, the ones who were truly happy were most probably the low-ranked disciples who were only allowed to enter the mountain every 10 years. Only the nascent soul practitioners who were leading the groups of the various sects were left. Though there were many spiritual artifacts in Sword-Seeking Mountain, a person could only choose a single weapon in his or her lifetime. Those who had already chosen one would not receive the recognition of a new mystic tool when they entered again. "Old ancestor, aren't you going in to take a look?" When you came over. Speaking of which, even he himself was a little surprised. This sovereign Yu Yao seemed to be especially poor. Even the flying spiritual sword beneath her feet was something she asked for from him. He was really suspicious of how she managed to survive until the demigod stage. Zhu Yao nodded. Thinking that she indeed needed a weapon as well, she looked around, and coincidentally, there was a piece of black ore at the side. "I'll just have to refine one myself. I'll choose this one then." The corner of Wen Yu's lips twitched. "Old ancestor, aren't you going in to choose?" The materials in the mountain all possess spirituality, and they will be more compatible with their owners. Why did she have to choose the most ordinary piece of black ore? This was completely unbefitting of her lofty status. And the materials in the mountain, no matter if its quality or quantity, are plentiful. "That's true." Zhu Yao nodded. "This piece of black ore is indeed a little small, and it's not enough to refine a sword. Then, let's go in and choose a larger piece of black ore again. Can you let go of this black ore, hey?" Zhu Yao, however, had already entered the mountain in a flash. She did not have much interest in high-grade materials. With the way she was courting death, no matter how good the materials were, they would all be wasted. As for weapons, they were fine as long as they were convenient to use. Black ore was a commonly seen material. After walking for a distance, she found a piece of suitable size. Just as she was about to reach out her hand to pick up that piece of black ore, suddenly, a white round rock rolled over from the side, knocking away that piece of black ore, and appeared next to her hand. Zhu Yao frowned and did not think too much about it. She thought that it was because of the wind and that it was just a coincidence. Hence, she took another 2 steps forward and continued to pick up that piece of black ore again. Just as she reached out her hand, that piece of white rock once again rolled over. With a pa sound, it knocked away the black ore once again. Why did she feel that this rock was doing it on purpose? Zhu Yao frowned and continued to pick up that piece of black ore in disbelief. As expected, that piece of white rock once again rolled over. This time, it collided with it even more ferociously, instantly knocking the black or 1 to 2 meters away. The white rock quietly stopped in her hand, looking as though it was telling her to hurry up and pick it up. Chapter 247. It knocked against the tree a few times, and seeing that it was basically unable to move the withered tree, the entire rock was in trouble. It anxiously rolled to and fro next to the withered tree, leaving behind streaks of imprints. A moment later, as though it had suddenly thought of a solution, it rolled a few meters back, and then it suddenly accelerated and rolled downwards, fiercely crashing into the tree. Then, with a "pa" sound, it bounced up, and using the recoil, it jumped over. However, at this moment, Zhu Yao had already successfully picked up the black ironstone. White rock. With a creak, it stopped at her feet. As though it was stunned for a moment, the entire rock instantly turned gray. The rock that was initially snow-white like jade instantly turned into a heavy gray, as though it had received an injury that the rock could not endure. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She could not be bothered with this rock. Keeping the black ironstone, she turned around and planned to return. That white. No, the gray rock paused for a moment, and then it immediately followed her with a grumble. Like a little tail, it rolled and knocked away the rocks, plants, and weeds at the side, following her closely. "Stop following me," Zhu Yao sighed. Not only did this rock have a spirit, it had evidently awakened its own intelligence. "Even if you follow me, I won't choose you. Hurry and return to your mountain." The city was very dangerous. The gray rock clattered and turned into a dark gray, looking as though it was about to split apart. However, it still did not give up and continued to follow behind her with a grumble. With every step she took, it would roll a little. With every 2 steps, it would roll a little. Even if it encountered obstacles, it would still think of ways to follow her footsteps. Just why was it so stubborn? Zhu Yao was out of ideas. She watched as that stupid rock, in order to avoid a big tree, was about to roll into the small river at the side, and she could not help but reach out to grab it. That rock was stunned for a moment, and then it was evidently overjoyed. With a swoosh, it once again returned to its snow-white color, and it grew even brighter, and it even rubbed against her palm like a spoiled child. She felt that there was a need to talk to it about life. How to be a rock with integrity. "Coo, little rock, I know you've awakened your own intelligence, and you can understand my words," Zhu Yao said with a stern look. "I came in here to look for artifact refinement materials. Do you understand artifact refinement? You need to melt rocks, and your body will even split apart, you know? You've already gained sentience. If you continue to cultivate, you might even become a spirit. Why should it be refined into an artifact? If it was refined into a weapon, even if it became a spirit, it would still be a sword spirit. Don't give up on your dignity as a stone spirit." The stone stopped rubbing her palm as if it was frightened by her words. "Do you want to be split into 4, or do you want to become a happy rock spirit? Go back to the mountain and continue your cultivation. Don't come out and wander around in the future. Don't let other cultivators find you." The stone was completely silent. It seemed like it had listened to him, just as Zhu Yao was about to put it down and let it happily roll around. However, the stone gave off a creaking sound as if it was breaking. A crack suddenly appeared on the jade-white stone, and it seemed to be spreading across the entire stone. "What are you doing?" Zhu Yao was shocked. "Don't take things too hard, hey?" Creak. The rock continued to crack. Zhu Yao was dumbfounded. It couldn't have cracked itself in front of her, just because she said that one had to melt rocks to refine artifacts, right? Do you have to be so serious when chatting? Creak. The rock continued to crack. Don't crack. The hell? This guy was committing suicide. All right. I'm afraid of you. I'll bring you back, all right? The stone paused and finally stopped cracking. It then continued to rub against her palm like a spoiled child. Zhu Yao. This sword search lasted for an entire day. As the sect's mascot, she had no choice but to guard the mountain for the entire day. Only when the various sects retreated did she bid farewell to Wan Yu. and returned to her residence on the mountain peak. The facilities in her cave residence were rather complete, and there was a specialized artifact refinement area. He took out the black ironstone and the strange stone and placed them on the table. Then, he made a hand seal and ignited the smelting furnace. He controlled the fire's spiritual energy and burned the furnace until it was almost done. Only then did he turn around to take the black ironstone. However, she saw that the black ore that was initially placed at the center of the table had rolled to the right side of the table. Half of the rock was already suspended in midair, and beside it, a smaller white rock was desperately trying to push it off the table. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She reached out to pick up that troublemaking white rock and stared straight at it. "What are you doing?" The white rock paused. The entire rock suddenly began to turn pink, as though it had been caught doing something bad. Zhu Yao sighed. She once again placed the white rock at the center of the table. She picked up the black ore that was about to fall and threw it into the smelting furnace. Then, she circulated her spiritual energy to envelop that rock. Suddenly, a loud bang sounded from behind her. That white rock had unknowingly rolled off the table and was currently rolling towards the smelting furnace's entrance, looking as though it had forgotten about its life. "What are you doing?" Zhu Yao was shocked as she hurriedly grabbed it back. "You're crazy. You'll die if you roll in." The white rock struggled for a moment, as though it wanted to throw itself into the furnace. "Stop messing around. I didn't bring you back to refine you into an artifact." The rock was startled. In an instant, it turned gray, as though it was extremely sad. "Once you develop a spiritual consciousness, you'll die if you refine an artifact. Do you understand?" The rock continued to deepen. "Huh." Zhu Yao sighed. "Don't worry, I won't throw you away." Its color finally looked a little better. In her hands, it turned towards the furnace's direction and then turned towards her, as though it was seeking her assurance. "Enough. I will bring you along in the future as well. Even if I don't refine you into an artifact, I will still bring you along." Only then was the rock satisfied, and it quietened down. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Why did she feel as though she had picked up an ancestor? Forget it. Seeing that she had once been a rock spirit as well, she decided to focus on refining her artifact. She began to concentrate on refining tools, and white stone also obediently leaned against her leg, sticking to her like a little tail, following her up and down. A day later, Zhu Yao finally completed the final step of carving formations, and a 7th rank peak-grade artifact was completed. Due to the material limitations of the black ore, she could only refine it to this grade. The white rock was still leaning against her leg, not moving an inch away. Zhu Yao felt that her leg had turned numb from the pressure. Keeping her spiritual sword, she picked up the white rock on the ground. She glanced at the cracks on the rock and instantly recalled the days when she was used as various stepping stones by a certain floor master who had no morals. She could not help but send a strand of spiritual energy into the white rock's body in an attempt to help it recover. The moment the spiritual energy entered, it was suddenly bounced back by a huge force, causing her palm to turn numb. Zhu Yao had a shocked look. How could a rock that had just developed a spiritual consciousness contain such powerful and pure spiritual energy? It was even able to bounce her spiritual energy away. This was completely not a divine art. Unless it wasn't a rock in the first place. Zhu Yao's heart sank as she looked straight at the white rock in her palm. "Little rock, just what are you?" That rock did not reply, and simply happily rolled back and forth in her palm. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment, sat down in a lotus position, closed her eyes, and immediately sent a strand of divine sense into the little rock's body. What she saw was a dazzling golden world. Golden light that resembled a warm sun could be seen everywhere, and the rock was actually filled with metal spiritual energy. And the closer she went to the center, the purer the spiritual energy became. It was so dense that it looked as though it was about to materialize. There seemed to be something floating at the center of the rock, and it was in the shape of a ling. Before she could even see it clearly, she suddenly heard a crisp and childish voice resounding in the depths of her heart. "Chick." Zhu Yao trembled as she suddenly regained her divine sense. With widened eyes, She looked at the snow-white rock in front of her with a face of disbelief. Such a familiar formula, such a familiar smell. You're a metal spirit. Chick, the same voice once again resounded in the depths of her heart. The white rock happily circled around her and circled around her. The hell? Zhu Yao could not help but scold. She actually encountered a metal spirit again. Wasn't this Xiao Yi's cheat? Why the hell did it appear here? No, wait. Xiao Yi and this place were basically not from the same world. Since the spiritual energy in that world could turn into spirits, then naturally, the spiritual energy in this world could as well. However, looking at the looks of this metal spirit, it should have just gained sentience not too long ago. Metal spirit, have you always been in Sword-Seeking Mountain? Could it be that the reason why all the swords and materials in that sword-seeking mountain possessed sentience and were able to choose their own masters was because of the influence of the metal spirit? Chick. Chick chick. Chick chick. Chick, what's the meaning of chick chick, hey? Forget it, in any case. She did not expect this fellow who only knew how to act cute to help her. The metal spirit was like a cheat to practitioners with metal spirit veins. However, to Zhu Yao who possessed the lightning spirit vein, it was really useless. She kept the metal spirit into her storage pouch. Now that she had a weapon, it was time for her to head out for her mission. She organized the important clues she had gathered. The 5 mystic artifacts that sealed the devil were placed in 5 of the most dangerous, yet also the safest places. One of them was not far from here, in an abyss deep in the ocean. Zhu Yao calculated the time. There were still a few decades before the girl would revive. She could try her best to find the mystic artifact before she woke up. Old ancestor, something bad has happened. A few anxious voices suddenly sounded from outside. What's the matter? Old ancestor, Sword-Seeking Mountain. That disciple's voice grew even more anxious. The palace master sent me to invite you over. Something big has happened in Sword-Seeking Mountain. Zhu Yao immediately undid the seal on the artifact refining room and walked out. The moment she reached the entrance, she sensed a spiritual energy disturbance coming from the south. Chapter 248. Zhu Yao immediately flew to the main mountain. When Yu was already pacing around anxiously, and the moment he saw her, he immediately came to welcome her. Old ancestor, I don't know why, but this sword-seeking peak suddenly erupted. If this continues, I'm afraid it will affect our sect. Activate the protective mountain formation. I'll go take a look. Zhu Yao instructed, and then flew towards sword-seeking peak on her flying sword. She faintly guessed that the rampage of these spiritual swords might be related to the metal spirit in her body. The closer she got, the more she could feel the sword chi of those spiritual swords. She laid down a defensive enchantment and stopped less than 5 steps away from those spiritual swords. She took out her gold spirit. Sure enough, the spirit swords that were still restless just now suddenly stopped, and that piercingly cold sword chi also slowed down quite a bit. Jinling, it seems like you can't follow me anymore. Gee. The rock tilted to the right, seemingly confused. These swords are sentient. Zhu Yao pointed to the front. These swords had definitely gone berserk because they realized that the metal spirit was missing. You're the one who gave them spirituality. Once you leave, they'll turn back into ordinary magic tools. Unless you have a way to calm them down, I can't take you with me. Gee. The metal spirit jumped up and instantly became excited. It screeched at the swords flying in the sky. GGGGG. GGG. GG. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. No matter how many times it cries out, it's useless, right? These spirit swords obviously didn't want the metal spirit to leave. Chick. The metal spirit let out another long cry. Suddenly, those floating swords seemed to lose their momentum and fell down with a swoosh. It was as if it was raining spiritual swords. In a short while, all the spiritual swords were gone. Even the piercingly cold sword chi had disappeared without a trace. Damn, it really worked. So, the common language of the weapon world was Jixing? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Honestly speaking, she really did not want to bring the metal spirit along. This thing was basically a super cheat. Whoever picked it up would become a bug. It was better to stay on sword-seeking peak. After all, with so many spirit swords around. Unless the metal spirit was willing, even if someone discovered it, no one would be able to take it away. But it just had to stick to him. I don't have a gold spirit root. He sighed deeply. He could only put away the metal spirit. She had easily dealt with the spiritual sword's rebellion. Wen Yu's eyes were practically glowing when he looked at her. Zhu Yao took the opportunity to suggest going out for a trip. As for the reason, the world is so big. She wanted to see it. Wen Yu's face collapsed, and with a face full of snot and tears, he howled once again. Old ancestor, you can't leave. If you leave and abandon Forgotten God Palace, what will we, who are all alone, do? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She sounded as though she was a heartless man. All right, I'll be back as soon as possible. Old ancestor. He still wanted to say something, but Zhu Yao's figure flashed, and she nimbly slipped away. If she were to continue talking to him, she wouldn't be able to leave. Wen Yu's heart was full of grievances, but before he could pour it out, the other party disappeared. Suddenly, a sense of crisis arose in his heart. It seemed like this sovereign Yu Yao still did not have any sense of belonging towards Forgotten God Palace, which was why she left so decisively. No, he had to think of a way to make her stay here forever. Yes, everything is for the sect. Zhu Yao madly flew several hundred kilometers, and only when she saw a large body of water did she slow down. When Yu had unintentionally revealed that when the girling Luo used her body as a sacrifice to activate the ancient sealing technique, she acted as a vessel to carry the devil. The 5 mystic artifacts were scattered to 5 different places by the residual energy of the sealing formation. One of them was in the vicinity of this sea region. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment, cast an art, and turned into her modern appearance. She then concealed her own cultivation and only revealed her Azoth core cultivation. She then headed towards an island at the center of the sea. The island was extremely quiet, as though there weren't many people around. That's not right. Didn't Wen Yu say that this island was a large-scale deity cultivation market? There should be a lot of practitioners here, so why was it so quiet? She headed towards the center of the island, and the number of people in her surroundings gradually increased. However, they were all hurrying towards a certain direction, and they even had strange, excited looks on their faces. Fellow Taoist. Zhu Yao stopped a foundation practitioner and politely asked, I wonder where you guys are heading to in such a hurry? That foundation practitioner was a little annoyed when he was stopped. However, seeing that the other party's cultivation level was higher than his, he could only reply with a sullen voice. The treasure-gathering pavilion's auction is about to begin. We are naturally rushing over to participate in it. If we are any later, we won't be able to see it. Treasure-gathering pavilion? Zhu Yao was startled for a moment. Just as she was about to clarify, that foundation practitioner had already walked far away, as though he would not be able to make it in time. Was that auction really that interesting? Compared to the auction, she was more worried about how she was going to find that mystic artifact. Turning around, just as she was about to head to another place to take a look, a green-robed man walked towards her. He said with a gentle smile, Fellow Taoist, aren't you going to take a look? This is a grand gathering that only happens once every 100 years in the cultivation world, you know. It has always been filled with countless rare and precious treasures. Zhu Yao sized up this youth. He looked to be about 20 years old, and his cultivation level was at the early stages of foundation. He was dressed in a green robe, and there was a symbol of a copper coin embroidered on his sleeves. She came to a realization and immediately said, You're a prop? Strip? He had a puzzled look. What I mean is, you're someone from that whatever treasure-gathering pavilion, and you're here to pull in business. His expression stiffened for a moment, and then immediately recovered. Ho-ho, fellow Taoist, don't misunderstand. I just saw that you looked unfamiliar, so I wanted to introduce you. Thank you. Zhu Yao turned around and left. I'm not interested. Fellow Taoist. That youth grew anxious and once again blocked in front of her. This auction only happens once every 100 years, you know? Zhu Yao spread out her hands. I don't have any money. She was as poor as a doornail, all right? Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. His face looked as though she was joking, My treasure-gathering pavilion has always had a wide network, and we are well informed. We have been on this island for several thousand years, and the treasures we have obtained are countless as well. Even if fellow Taoist doesn't attend the auction, it would be great for you to take a look at the others. Well informed? Zhu Yao was startled. Then, could she inquire about the location of that mystic artifact? Her interest was instantly piqued. Then let's go take a look. Fellow Taoist, please. Zhu Yao followed after that youth, and only then did she realize. There was indeed a large-scale market at the center of the island. However, it was concealed by a formation in the surroundings, and it was hard to detect it from the sky. The moment she stepped past the formation of the market, the world in front of her had completely changed. Practitioners were walking to and fro everywhere. On both sides were bustling streets, and at the sides were various shops selling talismans, medicinal pellets, and so on. However, all of them had the symbol of a copper coin at the entrance. It seemed like that treasure-gathering pavilion had opened a chain store. That person led her into a store that sold mystic artifacts. There weren't many people in the store. 2 people dressed in the same attire as the youth welcomed them and bowed towards the youth. However, he waved his hands and personally brought her around. It seemed like this person, and he was even the leader. I wonder how I should address fellow Taoist? My surname is Liu. A single character, Gua. Zhu Yao casually made up a story. Liu Gua? What's so strange? So it's fellow Taoist Liu. He still politely bowed. This one is Zhen Yuan. This is the store that has the most complete collection of mystic artifacts in treasure-gathering pavilion. Fellow Taoist Liu, feel free to look around. Zhu Yao followed him as they walked and was not interested in these mystic artifacts. In any case, they were all 5th ranked and below. In her heart, she was thinking of a way to inquire about the situation of that sealing mystic artifact without leaving a trace. Fellow Taoist Liu, feel free to take a look. This one is not boasting, but in this world, top-grade mystic artifacts can only be found in my treasure-gathering pavilion. Furthermore, there are many of them, and we have everything you wish for. Zhu Yao swept a glance at him. This person sure knew how to advertise, as he had everything she wished for. Let her take a look at the one used to seal the devil, though. The hell? That pitch-black fan, and the sealing runes were even flashing on it? She wasn't seeing things, right? Fellow Taoist, you have good eyes. Zhen Yuan immediately came over, picked up that fan, and said, "This is one of the mystic artifacts used to seal the devil back then." It's actually true, hey? Isn't this a little too casual? Is this really the mystic artifact used to seal the devil? Of course it's real. His face was filled with sincerity. And it's even a 5th-ranked mystic artifact. Though due to the sealing arts, it is unable to unleash the full strength of a 5th-ranked mystic artifact. This is one of a kind in this world. 5 sets of devil mystic artifacts. It's very meaningful. How about it, fellow Taoist? Do you want to have one? It's only 100 mid-grade spirit stones, you know? You won't suffer a loss if you buy it for 100, and you won't be fooled if you buy it for 100. Is it really all right to sell a mystic artifact used to seal the devil so casually? Do you have to be this casual, hey? Where's your integrity, hey? Zhen Yuan saw that she did not reply for a long while and gritted his teeth. How about this, fellow Taoist? If you really like it, I can give you a 50% discount. 50 mid-grade spirit stones, how about it? Zhu Yao felt that her worldview had to be adjusted. Fellow Taoist, this is already the lowest price. I can't go any lower. Why don't you just tell me? How much is it? Fellow Taoist, we have to do business as well. Any lower, and we won't be able to pass. Zhu Yao carefully inspected that fan. The sealing runes on it faintly emitted out divine might, and within the fan, there was even black, devilish aura circulating. This was indeed one of the 5 mystic artifacts. She never expected that she would find her target so quickly. She wanted to buy it, but the main point was, she really did not have any money on her. Earlier, she left in a hurry and had completely forgotten to advance her wages to Yu. After pondering for a moment, she immediately summoned the flying sword when you gave her. How about this? I left in a hurry, so I didn't bring any spirit stones. Though this flying sword of mine is a 4th-ranked mystic artifact, it's a high-grade one. How about I use it to exchange for this fan of yours? Zhen Yuan was startled. A hint of brilliance flashed past his eyes, but it immediately disappeared without a trace. Smiling at her, he said, "Fellow Taoist, exchanging your 4th-ranked mystic artifact for my 5th-ranked one isn't too good, right? Then forget it." Zhu Yao turned around and left. Did he think she was blind? This mystic artifact had evidently been placed here for a very long time. The reason why it could not be sold was most probably because it sealed the devil, making it unusable. How could it still be considered as a 5th-ranked mystic artifact? Thank you, dear Xinyue Juanxi, for receiving the Fox Demon's Heshabi as a reward. Chapter 249. Wait a minute. As expected, Zhen Yuan called out to her and said with a troubled look, "Fellow Taoist, my shop indeed doesn't have the rules of bartering. Why don't we do this? Why don't you head to the back hall to rest first? After I ask my boss, I will give you a reply." All right. Zhu Yao happily agreed. Following Zhen Yuan, they arrived at a courtyard after several turns and sat next to a stone table. After Zhen Yuan instructed her with a few words, he retreated. Zhu Yao sat for exactly an hour, and in the middle, a person who looked like a waitress came to serve tea and snacks. After that, there were no other movements. Zhu Yao faintly felt that something was amiss, and just as she was about to stand up and ask someone, suddenly, the formation beneath her feet shone brightly, and a large number of vines emerged, instantly binding her tightly. What's with this situation? You human practitioners are really stupid. Zhen Yuan suddenly appeared in the courtyard and looked at her with a complacent smile. On his shoulders stood a little demonic beast that looked like a rat and a bird. He waved his hand. "Hand it over." That demonic beast instantly turned into a flash and returned to Zhen Yuan's shoulder in an instant. Its mouth, however, was biting onto her storage pouch. The hell? So this was a black shop. Zhen Yuan took the storage pouch and weighed it in his hand. "If you're sensible, then take the initiative to remove the imprint on this storage pouch. I will then let you die a little more painlessly." "Just who are you?" Zhu Yao solemnly said. "Why is that mystic artifact used to seal the devil in your hands?" "Me." The man smiled. "You dare to barge into Illusory Realm Island, yet you don't know who I am? Illusory Realm Island?" Zhu Yao was startled. "There's actually someone who doesn't know of Illusory Realm Island." Zhen Yuan's smile grew even deeper. With a wave of his hand, the small courtyard that was still fresh and elegant earlier, as though it was fading away, began to change. The stone table turned into a stone covered in moss, and the trees turned into man-eating flowers with their bloody mouths wide open. And those houses had all disappeared, turning into a dense forest. How is this possible? Zhu Yao widened her eyes. Though she had suppressed her cultivation, her divine sense had always been paying attention to her surroundings. She actually did not realize that everything was an illusion. Zhen Yuan coldly laughed. "When you appeared in the sky, I had already noticed you. The moment you land, you will definitely be struck by my illusion art. What's up with those human cultivators?" She clearly saw so many people on the street, and each of them had a different cultivation base and appearance. She also said to someone that if it was just an illusion, it was impossible to imitate something like spiritual power. They are all true human practitioners, and not illusions. Zhen Yuan patted his clothes without a care in the world. A true human cultivator. That's why I say you human cultivators are too stupid. You clearly know that this sea region is dangerous, yet you still deliver yourself to us. Zhen Yuan gave her a disdainful look. The moment they heard that there was a treasure being auctioned here, they all rushed over like a swarm of bees. Thus, I casually made up this illusion and had them experience the day of the auction over and over again, trapping them in this illusion forever. After they die, even their souls would not be able to escape. This way, everything they have will be mine. It turned out that those people were the souls of the deceived practitioners and the entities condensed by the illusions. No wonder her spiritual awareness couldn't detect anything unusual. I wanted to use the same method to deal with you. Unfortunately, your luck isn't good, and you just had to refuse to go to the auction. If you don't enter the formation core, my illusion won't be able to deal with you. So I had no choice but to personally snatch it. You trapped so many practitioners, just to snatch their mystic tools and mystic treasures? He lowered his head to look at the storage pouch in his hands, and kept it. Who asked you to have so many treasures? I have seen it. Back then, when you were flying on your sword, you were using a peak grade 7th rank mystic tool. Although there are many 7th rank mystic tools, peak grade mystic tools are extremely rare. Since you've already delivered yourself to me, how can I miss it? I don't think so. Zhu Yao looked straight at him. No, wait, it's it. The reason you trapped these practitioners is most likely to absorb their life force, right? Zhen Yuan was startled. A hint of panic flashed past his eyes, and he suddenly said angrily, "A bunch of nonsense. How can I possibly be interested in the life force of humans? Is that so?" Zhu Yao coldly laughed. "Earlier, you mentioned us human practitioners twice, which proves that you're basically not human. And no matter if it's demons, spirits, or beasts, mystic tools are completely useless against them. You trapped so many human practitioners. Isn't it to absorb their life force to raise your cultivation? Could it be that you're raising them for fun?" His expression sank, and killing intent flashed in his eyes. In an instant, he materialized a few icicles and threw them towards her. "Although you know, I can't let you live." With a twist of her hand, Zhu Yao summoned a ball of fire. In an instant, the vines that were entangling her were turned into ashes, and even the icicles that were flying closer, under the high temperature, turned into water and evaporated. "You didn't eat those snacks?" His face was filled with shock. "Snacks?" Zhu Yao recalled for a moment, and only then did she recall that the person who looked like a prostitute had served them. "Is that poisonous?" "I'm sorry, it's been a long time since I've eaten anything other than the food my master made, because it's too hard to eat." Her stomach had long been pampered. The corner of Zhen Yuan's lips twitched as he was showered with a loving expression. So what if you can use mystic arts? You're still going to die here today." He coldly snorted. His robes fluttered without any wind, and his hair began to fly wildly as well. His cultivation, which was merely at the foundation stage earlier, suddenly began to rise explosively. Azoth core, nascent soul, and actually broke through to the demigod stage. In the end, it stopped at the early stages of demigod. Evidently, he had concealed his cultivation earlier. In an instant, the pressure of a demigod filled the entire island. "An Azoth human practitioner, let's see what you're going to use to fight against me." "Wait a minute." Zhu Yao sighed, and released the suppression on her own cultivation as well. The pressure of a demigod human practitioner was immediately pushed back. Why you?" His face was filled with shock. "How's that possible? You too?" Ho, I know how to conceal my cultivation as well." Zhu Yao's hands moved. Raising her hand, she summoned her own spiritual sword and then slashed it over. "Enough nonsense. If you want to fight, then come at me." Only then did Zhen Yuan regain his senses. In a flash, he dodged her attack, and in the next moment, thousands of tree vines drilled out from the ground, entangling towards Zhu Yao. Zhu Yao dodged in a flash, but those vines seemed to have eyes of their own, as they followed her wherever she flew to. Zhu Yao had no choice but to fly higher and higher, as she cast an art to summon flames to burn those vines. However, just as she burned one, even more came pouncing over. In a moment of carelessness, her right leg was entangled by a tiny vine. She turned around and slashed it with her sword. In an instant, it exploded. Zhu Yao simply felt a sharp pain on her leg, as a large amount of venom flowed out from the flower bud. Half of her pants were completely corroded. She hurriedly summoned spiritual flames to burn that half of the vine. Yet, she was still injured. Her leg was dyed red, and it really fucking hurt. "It's useless. You definitely don't possess the fire spirit vein. Your flames are basically unable to keep up with the growth speed of these vines." Zhen Yuan smiled arrogantly, looking as though victory was within his grasp. Zhu Yao was instantly enraged. "Mama's egg, you can burn anything, but you actually have to burn my clothes. Master isn't by my side, This old lady only has this set of clothes to keep up appearances, yet you still want to burn it." Her fury instantly rose, and in an instant, she was so furious that she wanted to chop someone up. She no longer cared about the plants and flowers, as she immediately cast an art and cast heavenly descent. In an instant, thousands of lightning bolts came pouncing down, blasting the entire island until it was charred on the outside and tinder on the inside. Zhen Yuan was instantly dumbfounded, as he simply could not believe his own eyes. "You? Why your lightning? It's too late to know now." Zhu Yao waved her hand, and an especially thick lightning bolt charged straight at him. It struck right onto its target. The vines around Zhen Yuan instantly turned into charred ashes, and they instantly fell from the sky. With a poob sound, he puked out a large mouthful of blood. His eyes darkened, as he suddenly cast a wind-type art. Blowing up the sand on the ground, he then blew it towards Zhu Yao. In a flash, he turned into a ray of green light and was about to head towards the horizon. "You want to run?" Zhu Yao erected a defensive barrier to block the incoming sand. At the same time, she swung the spiritual sword in her hand, turning it into a long whip formed from lightning bolts. In an instant, it coiled around that ray of green light. With a swing of her hand, she forcefully pulled it back, and it fell onto the ground. A few bolts of lightning descended, and he completely lost the strength to retaliate. Stop." Zhen Yuan no longer had the arrogance he had before, as he shouted for her to stop with a flustered look. Raising an item in his hand, he loudly said, "Let me go, otherwise, I will destroy this mystic artifact." In his hand, he was holding onto the fan which had a portion of the devil sealed within. "Don't come over, otherwise, I will destroy it." Zhu Yao stopped and frowned. Zhen Yuan was joyous, as he thought that this threat was effective. "Didn't you come here to find this? Don't force me into a life and death struggle." The moment his voice fell, a ray of white light shone next to him. An item flew out from the storage pouch he snatched from Zhu Yao earlier. Chick, a resounding sound resounded. He simply felt his hand burning, and he subconsciously loosened his grip. In the next moment, that fan had already flown into Zhu Yao's hands. "Good job." Zhu Yao caught the fan and the metal spirit that flew over. Chick, 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 chick. The metal spirit happily rolled around in her palm. Being praised, it was so happy, so happy. When Zhen Yuan saw that both escaping and threatening were useless, his face instantly turned green. Gritting his teeth, he did not know what he did, but his entire body began to emit out a green glow, and even the entire island began to tremble. The ground, which was still charred black earlier, began to emit out a large amount of thorns. The long green thorns emitted a cold glint, and they were even dripping with purple liquid. Large and terrifying man-eating flowers drilled out from the ground, and with their mouths wide open, they looked as though they could choose their prey at any moment. Zhu Yao had no choice but to fly into the sky, only to see that Zhen Yuan's entire body was already surrounded by a green glow, and its size was growing larger. In an instant, it had already occupied a sixth of the island. It seemed like he had already thrown caution to the wind and was planning to fight her to the death. Now, he wanted to reveal his true form. As expected, a quarter of an hour later, the green glow dimmed, and a gigantic demonic beast the size of a building appeared on the ground. It looked very much like a gigantic toad, and its 4 limbs were crawling on the ground. However, on its back, there was a gigantic purple bud, and it was even faintly emitting out poisonous gas. This appearance was a little similar to an object she had seen in cartoons in the past, the wondrous frog seed. However, this one was a little uglier. It opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of poisonous gas, and the entire island was covered in a purple poisonous gas. Zhu Yao once again cast an art, summoning countless heavenly das, instantly dispersing the poisonous gas. However, the flower bud on the back of the demonic beast suddenly opened, turning into several vines that swung towards her. These were completely different from the vines from before. This time, they were evidently much faster, and she was having a hard time dodging them. Just as she dodged one, another one came swinging straight at her, striking straight onto her defensive barrier. She even felt a pain in her chest, as though it was about to shatter. Zhu Yao tightened her grip on the sword in her hand, and in an instant, purple lightning filled the entire sword's body. With a wave of her hand, she sliced off one of the vines, and then she turned around, wanting to dodge the remaining ones. However, a beast's roar suddenly sounded from behind her. Croak. As expected, it's still a frog. A black figure instantly pressed down from above her head. Zhu Yao's heart clenched, yet she realized that she had nowhere to retreat to. That gigantic frog was pressing down, and she had already made preparations to summon her sword intent. Just as that demonic beast was about to come closer and was about to squash her into a meat patty, that gigantic figure suddenly tilted, and with a plop, it landed next to her feet. As though it was possessed, it rubbed against her feet with an intoxicated look and called out, "Meow, Zhu Yao." What the hell was going on? Jin Yuan, who had transformed into a gigantic frog, was startled as well. With a swoosh, it fiercely leapt a few steps back. It looked at her with a terrified look, as though it did not understand why it was acting abnormally earlier. "You, what mystic art did you use on me earlier?" Like hell she knew. Evidently, you were the one who went crazy, right? The situation after that was developing in a strange direction. Jin Yuan, who had transformed into a demonic beast, seemed to have suddenly activated some sort of hidden attribute. As long as its bestial body approached her, it would mysteriously turn into an infatuated beast in a second. It would meow in all sorts of ways, begging to be petted and hugged like a monkey begging for survival. However, in the next moment, it would regain its senses, and then it would leap away regretfully. Going back and forth like this, it would never get tired of it, as though its spirit had been split. Zhu Yao. She turned to look at this beast that was constantly running back and forth. First, it approached her. Meow, meow, meow. Then, it ran a few steps away. "You beast, what did you do to me?" She was panting for it. This situation, why did she feel that it was a little similar to the world-favorable impression ability from before? However, the effective range seemed to have shrunk. However, back then, when she was in her human form, such a situation did not happen either. Could it be that it was only effective against beast-shaped demonic beasts? Wait a minute. Back then, when she was squashed to death by that stupid dragon, she probably, did not turn off the world-favorable impression ability. Then, she suddenly felt that her entire being was unwell. "Meow. I beg for a pat. I beg for my fur to be smoothed out, all right?" The ingenious frog seed was about to rub against her body. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. "You don't even have fur, all right? Smoothing my ass." She did not like toads in the slightest, all right? Especially one that emitted poisonous gas. Zhu Yao gritted her teeth. Chapter 250. All of the man-eating plants on the island instantly turned into scorched earth. The poisonous gas dispersed, and the culprit beast let out a barbecued smell. Zhen Yuan was struck to the point where its 4 legs were facing the sky, revealing its white belly. Its gigantic figure shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye as well. In just a few moments, it was already the size of a regular puppy. Zhu Yao's strike was basically merciless, instantly shattering its inner core. Its cultivation would definitely fall. Zhu Yao walked over. Its 4 paws twitched, flipping over. Trembling, it laid on the ground and begged for mercy. Great deity, please spare my life. This little beast knows its wrongs, and will never dare to do it again." Zhu Yao frowned, and coldly said, "Where did you go wrong?" My mistake is..." Its figure trembled. This little beast had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai, and offended Great Deity. "Great Deity, your fortune is as great as the heavens. Please do not bicker with this little beast. Spare this little beast." It cried out loud, and its little body was even more so, trembling like a leaf that was being blown by the wind. It was truly pitiful. Zhu Yao sighed. "I won't kill you." Jin Yuan was joyful. Raising its two grape-like black eyes, its face was filled with joy. But I can't let you go either. Zhu Yao's tone changed, and Jin Yuan's face paled. Jin Yuan, you don't even know what you did wrong. What makes you think that your actions can be forgiven? No, I really know my wrongs. I've repented. It tried its best to explain. Zhu Yao coldly laughed. The only thing you regret is that the person you met was me. You only regret being caught by me. You only regret messing with me. However, I don't think there's anything wrong with you imprisoning the souls of these practitioners. Jin Yuan was stunned. If you truly repent, you wouldn't be begging me for mercy today. Zhu Yao said word by word. That's why I can't forgive you. The reason why I won't kill you is because I don't have the authority to decide a person's life or death. You're a 9th-rank demonic beast, and you have already cultivated into a human form. You entered the world and learned the way of humans. Yet, you forgot your purest heart. In order to cultivate, you fed on the life force of mortals. You are not really asking for forgiveness from me, but from all the people on this island who died because you sucked the life force out of them. If I spare you today, then the sin of killing these people will also be on me. I'm also a murderer who connived with you. Zhu Yao's expression turned cold. She instantly cast a mystic art, and a gigantic formation instantly enveloped the entire island. She slowly said, Jin Yuan, I won't kill you, but I will imprison you on this island forever. You will never see or touch anyone again, just like the souls you've trapped. Only when you truly repent will you be able to transcend. No. He suddenly became agitated and struggled to crawl towards her. He couldn't see anyone and couldn't touch anyone. What was the difference between him and a ghost? You can't do this to me. I really know that I was wrong. You clearly have an aura that beasts like. Shouldn't you be protecting me? Why? Since you have the courage to make a mistake, you have to have the pressure to accept punishment. Punishment? Why am I the only one being punished? He began to shout with all his might. I was able to stay here for more than 1,000 years, so how could those human practitioners of the cultivation world not sense it? They were the ones who allowed me to do this. They were the ones who asked for it. It's basically not my fault alone. Zhu Yao did not waste her breath. The formation immediately descended, and Jin Yuan instantly disappeared from the ground. Various runic characters floated in the air, and in less than a few moments, they disappeared without a trace. Zhu Yao sighed. An unclear emotion rose in the depths of her heart, and she felt a little uncomfortable from the stuffiness. Perhaps the demonic beasts she had met before were all too simple. They were either kind to her to the end, or extremely vicious to her. They either wanted to eat her the moment they met, or they wanted to stick to her the moment they met. Hence, in her heart, demonic beasts were all simple and direct. There wouldn't be so many twists and turns. However, Jin Yuan was different. When it came to demonic beasts, its thoughts and actions were more like a human's. She had always felt it was strange. Why would a demonic beast like it be interested in the mystic artifacts and treasures of human practitioners? In the beginning, it simply wanted to snatch her mystic artifact, and it even used it as a gimmick to lure people into it. She pondered. Behind it, there was no lack of shadows of human practitioners. There was even a possibility that the various clans and sects were involved. Everyone knew that this region of the ocean was dangerous. However, this treasure-gathering pavilion had evidently existed in the cultivation world for a long time. Not just here, it most likely had branches in other places as well. Jin Yuan merely snatched treasures and then transferred them to other practitioners. It absorbed their life force, while various mystical treasures could be seen in the cultivation world. Jin Yuan was right. It was not that the human practitioners of the cultivation world did not know about all of this. They simply let it be. Everything was because of benefits. Jin Yuan was in the wrong, and the other practitioners who made use of it, or even let it be, were similarly in the wrong as well. Zhu Yao suddenly felt a little dismal. Clearly, these so-called practitioners were no different from ordinary people. Whether it was for fame, benefits, or cultivation, they fought to the death. However, because of the lofty title of deity practitioners, they seem to have rationalized everything. They could do bad things with peace of mind. Yet, they were still able to ascend to the higher realm and attain eternal life. Just what kind of world was this? This so-called Tao, what kind of Tao was it walking? Why was it that she could not see the slightest bit of positive energy and only saw ugliness and destruction? Under such a deformed Tao, it was very normal for something like resentment to be produced. Zhu Yao took a deep breath and suppressed the feelings of disgust towards this world that were faintly rising from the depths of her heart. Circulating her spiritual energy, she formed hand seals and chanted the art of rebirth. A moment later, a large formation appeared in the sky above the island, emitting out an endless golden light. In less than an instant, rays of white light slowly rose from the ground and began to rise towards the horizon. These were all the souls that Zhen Yuan had been trapped here for thousands of years. Though Zhen Yuan was sealed and could no longer imprison them, most of the souls had been trapped here for too long and could no longer enter the underworld. Hence, she could only send them on their way. The number of white lights increased, and like a meteor shower during the day, they slowly flew towards the sky before disappearing in the end. The entire island was enveloped by this white light. After spending exactly half an hour, the last ray of light finally rose and disappeared. It could be seen just how many souls were imprisoned here. Zhu Yao took a deep breath and then retracted the formation. The art of rebirth was a very simple mystic art, and the amount of spiritual energy it consumed was not much either. However, it could not last for half an hour. Adding that she had expended a large half of her spiritual energy to deal with Zhen Yuan earlier. Zhen Yuan was a 9th-rank demonic beast, and was about to take half a step into 10th rank. If not because she had the lightning spirit vein which naturally countered demonic beasts, she really would not have much of a chance of victory. After sending these souls away, she was already tired to the point where her limbs were a little soft. Just as she was about to sit down and adjust her breathing, the mystic artifact which sealed the devil in her hands suddenly shone. Something white floated out from it, and then it disappeared without a trace in a flash. Zhu Yao simply felt the back of her hand turning cold. In a flash, she actually saw the figure of a woman. Why would a woman's figure appear on this fan? The hell? It was that miserable girl. Zhu Yao was startled. She could not be bothered to rest, and immediately flew her sword in the direction of Forgotten God Palace. According to the original plot, the girl's soul would only return to her body several decades later, and she would awaken. However, with the addition of Zhu Yao, this butterfly, she could not be sure if an unforeseen event would occur. No, wait, an unforeseen event had definitely occurred. She suddenly recalled that when Zhen Yuan placed down a soul-trapping formation on the island, while trapping the other souls, did it also trap the 1/5 of the girl's soul? That was why the girl did not wake up even after so long. As for what happened after, there was a possibility that the weapon had left the island in the end, or Zhen Yuan had ascended and only returned after losing the power of trapping souls. That's right. That white figure earlier was 1/5 of the girl's soul, and the direction it disappeared in was coincidentally the direction of Forgotten God Palace. Currently, it should have already returned to the girl's body. Zhu Yao grew even more anxious as she frantically circulated her spiritual energy and flew back. The moment she arrived at Forgotten God Palace, she sensed an obvious spiritual energy fluctuation in the direction of the back mountain. Even if she was far away, she had already sensed it. Zhu Yao's heart clenched. It was too late. If the people of Forgotten God Palace were to find out about this, the entire cultivation world would know about the girl's awakening. At that time, it would be a never-ending tragedy. What should she do? Zhu Yao thought of a countermeasure as her line of sight turned towards the sword-seeking peak at the side. Got it. Metal spirit. She took out the rock from her pouch. Chick. The metal spirit rubbed against her hand. Can you make those swords and sword-seeking peak go berserk once more? Chick. Make the commotion a little bigger and exaggerate it a little. Chick. 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 It rolled forward and made a nodding motion. All right, then head to sword-seeking peak. Zhu Yao tapped on the rock. When this matter is over, I will come and fetch you. Remember, do not hurt anyone. Chick. Zhu Yao raised her hand and cast an art. The metal spirit turned into a ray of white light and flew towards sword-seeking peak. In just a few moments, the entire sword-seeking peak was in an uproar. Countless spiritual swords flew out and began to wildly dance in the air. As though they had gone mad, they sliced rocks and chopped trees. Every single one of them could be called a commotion. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched as she silently wiped off her sweat. This was a little too exaggerated, as though it was an ongoing project. However, she had to admit that she heaved a sigh of relief. The sacred lake was located in the same direction as this sword-seeking peak, and they were merely a kilometer apart. With a commotion like this, Forgotten God Palace would most likely think that the mountain had gone berserk again, and would not notice the resurrection of the girl in the sacred lake. Turning around, she flew over, only to see that the formation above the sacred lake had already begun to crumble. The chains that were initially binding it had already broken apart, and the lake water was beginning to surge. The girl was slowly rising up. The formation shone brightly, however. Cracks began to appear on the formation above it. An illusory figure that looked exactly the same as the girl was currently merging with her body. Most likely, this was the 1/5 of her soul that had escaped from that mystic artifact. And looking at the situation in the lake, the moment the soul returned to her body, the girl would wake up. Zhu Yao immediately set down layers of concealment formations in the surroundings to prevent others from discovering the commotion here. Then, she cast an art, and without completely destroying the formation, she helped the girl's body to escape from the lake. An hour had passed, and that illusory figure had finally completely merged with the girl's body. The cracks on the formation above the lake had disappeared as well, and the girl slowly rose up. Her hair fluttered without any wind, and her clothes fluttered in the wind. That beautiful face of hers began to show signs of life, revealing a few hints of redness, making her look even more soul-stirring. A moment later, she slowly opened her eyes, and the corner of her lips gently rose. With a faint and light smile, the entire world seemed to have lost its color. Even though she was of the same gender, Zhu Yao was dumbfounded by this sight as well. Even if she were to be described as a celestial being, it would not be able to describe this heaven-shaking beauty. For a moment, she forgot about time and the world around her. What remained was her heart throbbing as she looked at the girl who did not look like a real person slowly walking over. She lightly opened her vermilion lips, and a voice that sounded like an aureole flowed out. "Your esteemed mother, which bastard son of a bitch threw this old lady into the water?" Patter. She felt as though she could hear the sound of her dream shattering. Yet, the girl was still holding onto the corner of her skirt with one hand, as she looked at the lake full of water with a disgusted look. "My grandpa, this old lady hates wet skirts the most. If this old lady finds out who threw me here, I will curse him to be impotent for the rest of his life, and his entire family will be impotent." The contrast in this scene was so great that it made one speechless. So there's actually a living person here. The girl finally noticed Zhu Yao, who was at the side of the lake, and sized her up for a moment. "It's just that you look a little ugly." Zhu Yao. This girl's tragedy in the first half of her life was caused by her mouth, right? It definitely was, right? "Yo, brother." The girl waved her hand to greet her, and then ran towards her. Just as she took a step forward, she suddenly tripped, and with a splat, she fell from the center of the formation, falling head first into the water. She began to frantically wave her hands in the water. "Save. Save me. I don't know water." The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. With a wave of her hand, a gust of wind blew past, instantly pulling the drenched girl out. Her face was filled with fright. Where was the image of a noble and elegant fairy? She looked like a naked youth, and her entire body was emitting out a thick stench of a loser. "Thank you." She spat out a mouthful of water and panted heavily as she laid on the ground like a corpse. She looked as though she would not be able to recover in a short period of time. After panting for a whole 5 minutes, she then turned to look at her with a joyful look. "It's all thanks to you, big brother. Otherwise, this old lady would have drowned to death here." I never expected that this lake is so small, yet the meow water is so deep. The hell was Big Brother? I'm a girl. Ah. She sat up, sweeping a glance at her from head to toe. Her line of sight then stopped at her chest, with a stop-joking expression on her face. The hell? Small breasts are still breasts. I am a woman. She gritted her teeth. She suddenly stood up and suddenly reached out her 2 claws. With a splat, she pressed onto the soft flesh on her chest and began to rub it. This was the first time in her life that someone was assaulting her chest, and it was even from a motherfucking girl. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Thinking about it, she felt that she was at a disadvantage no matter what. She definitely could not tolerate this. Hence, in a fit of passion, she reached out her claws and pressed onto the other party's chest as well, only to feel a wave of turbulent waves. She had lost. Unvoid. Why were the two of them assaulting each other's chests here? The girl finally released her hands. Rubbing her aching chest, she voiced out suspiciously. You're so flat. Are you sure you're a girl? Do you have an opinion? Zhu Yao glared at her. Do you want me to take off my pants for you to see? Sure. Chapter 251. Hey, girlie. She bumped her arm and raised her brows. Thank you for earlier. What's your name? Let's be friends. I'm Ing Luo. Why did she feel like she was a woman from a good family being teased? Auntie, we're not dating. She was straight. The girl Ing Luo was stunned. Zhu Yao took a few steps forward and cast an art to restore the formation on the pool to its original state. Then, she took out a high-grade substitute talisman and pulled the girl's hand. Let me borrow your hand. A white light flashed on her fingertip, instantly slicing open a bloody line on her hand. She then dripped a drop of blood onto the talisman. SSSS. The girl took a deep breath, but did not resist. Instead, she looked at her actions curiously. Zhu Yao threw the talisman into the pool, and it instantly activated. With a flash of red light, the talisman instantly turned into the girl's appearance. Just like before, she closed her eyes and laid on the surface of the pool. The chains that broke earlier seemed to have come to life, as they heavily coiled around the girl. She had long prepared this substitute talisman. Initially, she had planned to use it to deceive the girl when she woke up. Oh, the girl exclaimed. Looking at her actions, her eyes shone. Not bad. So you're actually this amazing? Oh, right. Just what's your cultivation level? Zhu Yao turned to look at her and was about to reply. However, she then patted on her shoulder and added with a prideful look. Oh, right. I was a nascent soul practitioner in the past. However, because my soul has left my body for too long, I'm only at the foundation stage now. Demigod. My cultivation level is at the demigod stage. The girl lost her balance and knelt down with a thud. Girl, come here. Let's talk about life. Zhu Yao waved her hand towards her. However, the girl instantly cowered and looked at her with an awkward look. So, Sovereign, thank you for saving me. She politely bowed towards her. Enough, your avatar has already been exposed. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Wasn't it a little too late to talk about rules with her now? Pulling the girl to the side, she squatted down and activated her understanding big sister mode. I know you're the Ing Luo who sealed the devil. I just want to ask you, what are your plans for the future? I am a disciple of Forgotten God Palace, so naturally, I will return to the sect. The girl said with a matter-of-fact expression as she smiled. That place is my home after all. I have no objections if you wish to return to Forgotten God Palace, but you cannot use Ing Luo's identity. Why? She was confused. Sister. Zhu Yao patted on her shoulders and said with a heavy tone, it has already been more than 900 years. In the minds of the people of the world, you have long turned into a seal and perished together with the devil. Now that you've reappeared, what do you think others will think? The girl's eyes widened, but the demon seal didn't. I know the seal hasn't been removed. Zhu Yao looked at her, but will others believe it? The girl turned silent. She wasn't stupid, so naturally, she could understand what Zhu Yao was saying. You must know, fear is a very terrifying thing. The girl was silent for a moment, before letting out a deep sigh. You're right, I indeed cannot return to my previous identity. Raising her head, she looked at the incarnation that looked exactly like her in the pool. Then, Sovereign, what do you think I should do? She was naturally able to guess that the reason why this sovereign did all of this was to help her conceal her identity. However, she did not understand why she wanted to help her. There's no need for you to doubt me. I naturally have my own reasons for doing this. Zhu Yao took out the fan she obtained in Illusory Realm Island. Opening the fan, she revealed the faintly floating devilish aura. You should recognize this, right? This is. Ing Luo was stunned. Wasn't this the mystic artifact used to seal the devil? Why was it in her hands? Zhu Yao turned her head and looked at her with a stern expression. If I were to say that I'm a god, would you believe me? She had long thought of an excuse. She was startled for a moment, and then she suddenly widened her eyes. She sized Zhu Yao up with a look of disbelief and could not help but reach out her hand to touch her forehead. Sovereign, are you sick? The hell? I'm being serious here. She slapped down her hand. Sovereign, my cultivation level is low. Don't lie to me. A true god knows sealing arts. If you know them, back then, why would I have to? Before she could even finish, Zhu Yao flipped her hand, and a golden mystic seal appeared in front of the fan. The fan, which was still flowing with devilish energy earlier, instantly dissipated all of the devilish energy. Even the black fan had instantly reverted back to white, turning back into a regular mystic artifact. Your esteemed mother, you really know how to. Ing Luo was completely stunned. Can't you remove the profanity when praising someone? I merely repaired and perfected the seal on this fan. Zhu Yao continued to fool her. I'll tell you the truth then. The reason why I'm helping you is completely to find those 5 mystic artifacts. I have a way to deal with this devil once and for all. As long as the devil is dealt with, you will be able to openly appear in front of everyone. She looked at the fan and then looked at Zhu Yao. After pondering for a long while, she gritted her teeth and patted on her shoulder. All right, big sis. This old lady will fight with you. Why did she feel as though she had established a gang? This must be her imagination. I will look for the mystic artifacts myself. You just have to be careful not to be discovered by others. The girl smiled. After all, this matter is related to me, so how can I let you go alone? No need to persuade me. No matter what, I have to do my part. Why did she feel as though she was being glued to an idiot? Zhu Yao stuck an invisibility talisman on the girl, and on the way, she went to Sword-Seeking Mountain to find some materials. Retrieving the metal spirit, she stopped the rampage of those spiritual swords. She then swaggered back to Forgotten God Palace and plunged straight into the artifact refining room. After toiling for 3 days, she finally managed to refine a bracelet that could hide the girl's true appearance. Bringing her along, she immediately sprinted to the side of the pool. In the water was a girl who looked to be about 20 years old. She was no longer as breathtakingly beautiful as before, but she could still be considered delicate and pleasant. Her height was a little shorter than before as well. She looked all the way down, until her line of sight stopped at the chest that did not change in the slightest. Then, she suddenly raised her head and looked at Zhu Yao. Mama's egg, why did she feel so displeased? The moment she walked out of the artifact refining room, she bumped into the agitated Wenyu. Old ancestor, you're back. We're about to leave. His face instantly sank. Old ancestor, the new batch of disciples is about to ascend the mountain. Why don't you take in a disciple to play with before leaving? What the hell was play with? Zhu Yao pulled Ing Luo, who was at the side, over as a shield. I have already taken in a disciple. Huh? Wenyu was dumbfounded. He sized up Ing Luo for a moment. I'm called Ing. The girl who acted familiar took a step forward. Just as she was about to speak, Zhu Yao covered her mouth, and the words that were about to come out of her mouth instantly changed. Ing, old ancestor? When you looked back and forth between the two, and for a moment, he did not understand the situation. That's right, she's called Ing. The corner of Wen Yu's lips twitched. Enying? What a strange name. Wen Yu. Zhu Yao patted on his shoulder and said with a heavy tone, "This disciple of mine is someone that I took great pains to choose. Her resources are so good that nothing can be said about it. In the future, when she advances into a demigod, there won't be any problems at all." Wen Yu's eyes instantly shone. "I have decided to nurture her carefully. Old ancestor is right." He nodded repeatedly, his face filled with excitement. "So the reason why old ancestor left the mountain the last time was to choose a disciple for our sect. I'm so touched. What should I do? You know as well that I was a wandering practitioner in the past, and this cultivation method is different from others. So, in order to nurture a good disciple, I need to bring her out for some training." Zhu Yao continued to fool him. Wen Yu immediately took a step back and did not stop them. He wished that she could immediately leave and then return with 2 demigods. "Old ancestor, have a pleasant journey." This time, Zhu Yao was no longer in a hurry to leave, as she said with a troubled look. "Matters like cultivation have always been difficult. Not a single one of them can be lacking in luck, aptitude, and luck. I believe we will definitely encounter many difficulties on this path. Furthermore, I was a wandering practitioner in the past, and as for my family background, I'm afraid it will be quite inconvenient. Can you give me a salary?" Without saying another word, Wen Yu pulled out the storage pouch next to him and stuffed it into her hands. "Old ancestor, you can just go. I will take care of everything in the sect." "I'll leave it to you, Palace Master One." Her face was solemn. "Amen." Wen Yu nodded heavily. Zhu Yao pulled the girl in Luo and flew away on her flying sword. They headed west. As Zhu Yao flew on her flying sword, she pulled out a spiritual sword and handed it over. "Take this. I practiced this while I was refining that bracelet of yours." Ing Luo was startled for a moment. As though she had regained her senses, she received it. Zhu Yao turned to look at her and nudged her. What's wrong? Why did she suddenly become quiet? She was really not used to it. Wen Yu, is he the palace master of Forgotten God Palace? She suddenly asked. Of course he is. Then, what about the former palace master? Isn't that obvious? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at her. Naturally, she's either ascended or she's dead. Dead. Ing Luo frowned. After a long while, she let out a deep sigh. So she's already dead. Zhu Yao was startled. Looking at her relieved look, she suddenly recalled that in the scenario, she seemed to be the younger sister of the Forgotten God Palace Master. Though it was said that relationships between deity practitioners had always been shallow, she was still a good young lady with a proper bloodline. When she finally woke up, her only kin had already passed away. It was understandable for her to sigh. Do you know where the next mystic artifact is? Zhu Yao changed the topic. She had only found out that it was in the west, but she was not clear of its exact location. The girl did not remain depressed for long before she recovered. If I'm not wrong, it should be in the Heavenly Feather Clan. Heavenly Feather Clan? What's that? The Heavenly Feather Clan lives within the barrier of the Western continent. It is rumored that their clan is the descendant of the divine beast, the phoenix. They are born with wings and are able to soar in the 9 heavens. The descendant of the phoenix? Why does everyone in this world have descendants? Is it really all right to act so recklessly? The Heavenly Feather Clan has always had a violent temper, and they don't get along with human practitioners. If we were to barge in like this, we will definitely be attacked by everyone. Why didn't you say so earlier? It's good to make some preparations. You didn't ask either. Can I send this idiot back to the sacred pond? We're here. She suddenly called out. A large piece of land suddenly appeared in the sky. With a single glance, they could not see the end of it, as though it was a floating city in the sky. They immediately stepped onto that piece of land. However, before they could even take a few steps, they were blocked by a transparent wall, and they were unable to advance any further. Zhu Yao walked back and forth a few times. Yet, she was still unable to discern just what kind of formation this was. The two of them were at a loss for a moment. What should we do? If we forcefully break through, we will definitely be discovered. The girl pondered for a moment before suggesting, why don't we directly use a defensive-type mystic artifact and fuse a layer of defensive formations onto this barrier? We can then use the gap created by the formation to directly charge in. You're saying we should use the opportunity of fusing mystic artifacts to forcefully add a formation core to this barrier. The girl nodded. If it's just a defensive-type mystic artifact and not an offensive one, we won't be discovered. Good idea. Zhu Yao gave a thumbs up. But I don't have a defensive-type mystic artifact. Didn't you take a storage pouch from one you earlier? Oh, right. She had even forgotten about her salary. She hurriedly took out that pouch and began to fish out the items one by one. Spirit stones, MN. I can't use this for now. Medicinal pellet, MN. This can be used to save the girl's life. Mystic talisman, mid-grade mystic talisman. It's not very useful, so I'll give it to the girl as well. 4th rank flight mystic artifact, spiritual sword, substandard. 5th rank defensive mystic artifact, doo-doo. Zhu Yao. Ing Luo. When used taste was a little heavy. Coo. The girl Ing Luo received that piece of bright red cloth and said with a stern look, this shouldn't be his. Look, the symbol embroidered on this doo-doo isn't the symbol of Forgotten God Palace. It definitely belongs to another female practitioner. Halfway through her explanation, she paused, and her expression turned even more awkward. Wasn't this even more serious, all right? If it wasn't him, then who could it be? A gift from another female practitioner? And it was snatched from someone else? How did they snatch such a personal garment? And what were they supposed to do about it? What should she do? The hole in her brain was too big, and she couldn't even stop it. She never expected that Wen Yu would still be so fashionable despite his age. Why don't we take a look at what else is inside? Zhu Yao said. Sure. The girl's eyes instantly shone, turning into a gossipy mode. The two of them flipped the storage pouch upside down with excited looks. Unfortunately, other than a few low-rank spiritual swords and a few sets of male mystic robes, there were no other unknown objects. The two of them sighed. What a pity. Let's use this then. Zhu Yao picked up the doo-doo and placed it at the side. Circulating her spiritual energy, she activated the defensive formation on it, and then guided the formation towards the barrier. A bright light flashed, and a human-sized circular figure suddenly appeared in the transparent barrier. Now! Zhu Yao shouted, as she charged in together with Ing Luo. A moment later, the barrier had already returned to normal. However, on the transparent barrier, there was an additional red doo-doo fluttering in the wind. Zhu Yao, Ing Luo. Chapter 252. Forgotten God Palace 50 kilometers away. Achoo. When you violently sneezed. Could it be that old granny of his who had passed away was thinking of him again? Their fate was too shallow. In a blink of an eye, more than 100 years had passed. Fortunately, he still had one item of remembrance. Reaching out his hand to touch his side, he found nothing. His storage pouch seemed to be, old ancestor, hurry and return. The continent in the sky was extremely huge. The two of them walked straight for 4 hours before they could faintly see human figures. No, wait, they were bird figures. Every single person here had a pair of gigantic wings. Those wings were white, black, yellow, and red. Every single one of them was different. Flying in the sky, they looked like gigantic birdmen. However, the moment they landed on the ground, those wings would disappear. To prevent themselves from being exposed, they could only continue walking. The deeper they went, the more birdmen there were. They could faintly see a city. That city was huge, and there was an endless stream of birdmen coming and going. It was extremely bustling. The moment they entered the city, the two of them split up and asked around. However, after asking for an entire afternoon, not a single birdman knew anything. Yao, I think this place is a little too big. It seems like we won't be able to find it in a short while. Ing Luo panted a few times. Back then, when she was sealed, She had sensed that one of the mystic artifacts had fallen nearby. However, after so many years, she really couldn't pinpoint its exact location. It's too hard to find. Zhu Yao stopped at the city entrance. Girl, do you still remember what those 5 mystic artifacts look like? Of course I remember. She was the one who personally sealed them. Then, was one of them a jade tablet? She nodded. That's right. How did you know? On that jade tablet were the 2 words Azure City engraved. Ying Luo was startled. You've seen it before. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She pointed at the city entrance. I didn't see it in the past, but I've seen it now. Above the city entrance, a completely pitch-black plaque hung high up. Black miasma surged within, and the 2 red words Azure City were extremely eye-catching on the jade tablet. Around the jade tablet, golden sealing runes could faintly be seen flashing. The second mystic artifact. Mama's egg. Why were all the sealing mystic artifacts placed at such an eye-catching location? Wasn't this looking down on the intelligence of the people searching for them? What should we do? Ying Luo suppressed her voice. Evidently, this mystic artifact was used by the birdmen in this city as the city gate's nameplate. It seemed like this city was called Azure City. Why don't we just dig it out? If he dug it out in front of so many people, he would probably be beaten to death. Just as he was worrying about what to do, a loud sound suddenly rang out in the city, like the sound of a bugle horn. The deep and heavy voice instantly spread throughout the entire market. All of a sudden, all the birdmen scattered towards the market. Each of them had an anxious look on their faces as they hurriedly entered their houses. They even closed their doors and windows. After a short while, not many birdmen could be seen on the streets. Was that the sound of curfew? Zhu Yao raised her head and looked at the sky. It had indeed darkened. There's a way. Ying Luo winked at her. Aren't there still a few invisibility talismans in Wenju's storage pouch? We'll hide ourselves and go up the tower first. We'll make our move after they're gone. Is it reliable? Zhu Yao expressed her doubts. She patted her voluptuous chest. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Zhu Yao nodded. She first pulled Ying Luo to an empty alleyway and stuck on the invisibility talisman. They then returned to the city gates. Currently, not a single person could be seen on the streets, as every single household had lit up their candles. The 2 of them went up the tower together, and to their surprise, they realized that there was actually no one on duty. Just as Zhu Yao was about to fly on her flying sword to retrieve the mystic artifact, she was pulled by Ying Luo. Wait a minute. There's a formation on the wall. A row of pale yellow talismans floated above the city walls. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to notice it. This jade tablet cannot be taken out. You can only push it in. The wall was right inside. Where were they supposed to push it in? Zhu Yao carefully inspected the city walls. There's a door here. At the bottom right corner of the city walls, there was a wooden door. After pushing the door open, she realized that this city walls were a little different from the others. The city walls were extremely tall, and there was actually a space within the walls. It was like a mezzanine, and there was even a small staircase inside, which led straight to the top. And at the very top, there was actually a huge platform. Zhu Yao wondered what it was used for. In front of the platform was that mystic artifact. I finally found it. Hurry and retrieve it. Ying Luo anxiously urged. Are you certain that you can retrieve it? She felt that this matter was going a little too smoothly. Don't worry, it's all set. Zhu Yao took a step forward and lightly cast an art. That gigantic jade tablet slowly shrunk, turning into the size of a jade pendant, and flew into her palm. And on the city walls where the jade tablet was originally placed, a hole the size of half a person appeared. Through the hole, they could even see the densely packed birdmen below the city walls. And every single one of them were even carrying objects that looked like offerings. Zhu Yao, Ying Luo. The birdmen stared straight at the 2 of them. The 2 of them stared straight at the crowd. Complete silence. They stole the city tablet. Capture them. It was unknown who roared out, but in an instant, rows of birdmen flew up, pouncing towards them. Run! Grabbing onto Ying Luo, They madly flew in the direction they came from. The hell? What happened to the promised all set? Ingluo explained awkwardly. I've only heard that the harpies have the custom of offering sacrifices at night. I never expected that it would be today. And here I was wondering why all the black people had disappeared for a day. A mistake. This is definitely a mistake. Your sister's a mistake. Can't you be a little more reliable? She was screwed over by this brat. She had an awkward look. Why the hell did she always meet pig-like teammates everywhere she went? They're human practitioners. Kill them. When the birdmen chasing after them saw them flying on their swords, they grew even more furious. Flapping their wings with force, they instantly shot out several feathers. In a blink of an eye, some of those feathers turned into flames, some turned into icicles, and some even turned into sharp swords, attacking the two of them from all directions. Yu Yao behind. Ing Luo's face paled from fright. Zhu Yao circulated her spiritual energy, and with a wave of her hand, a cold wind swept towards the back. In an instant, the air was frozen inch by inch, and in an instant, all of the attacks behind them were frozen. Zhu Yao did not stop, and continued to circulate the spiritual sword beneath her feet. Just as they were about to reach the barrier they entered from, a bugle horn sounded from behind. The sound of a horn came from behind, and 5 or 6 birdmen suddenly appeared from the quiet forest in front of them, blocking their way. Capture those 2 human practitioners. One of them shouted out loudly and pounced towards her. The hell? Zhu Yao dodged to the side and had almost flung the girl Ing Luo behind her out. Sis, big sis Yu Yao, take it easy, take it easy. Zhu Yao turned to glare at her. Seeing that the other 4 were rushing over as well, she gritted her teeth and summoned a bolt of heavenly lightning. With a loud boom, it brushed past the 4 of them and struck down. In an instant, the faces of the 5 to 6 birdmen paled, as though they were frightened by this sudden bolt of heavenly lightning. Hurry and leave. Zhu Yao took the opportunity to fly all the way to the barrier. That little red doo-doo was already passionately waving at them. Zhu Yao immediately flew down, circulated her spiritual energy, and channeled it into the doo-doo's defensive mystic artifact. The 5 birdmen had already caught up to them. With a wave of their wings, yet another icicle shot towards the 2 of them. Io, my buttocks. Ing Luo, who was standing at the back, was struck in the center, and 2 icicles as thick as fingers appeared on her buttocks. Don't care about your buttocks, hurry and leave. That doo-doo had already been activated, and the exit had already appeared. Zhu Yao grabbed onto Ing Luo and hurriedly rolled out. She casually slammed her palm onto the ground, and in an instant, countless lightning bolts drilled out from the ground, forming a wall of lightning. Zhu Yao took the opportunity to fly on her sword, bringing along her piggish teammate whose buttocks were injured, and madly flew several hundred kilometers. Io, it hurts so much. The girl cast a fire-type mystic art to melt the icicles, and then rubbed her buttocks as she wailed. Is it that painful? Didn't she not even bleed? She reached out her hand to check her pulse. Huh. Ing Luo glanced at her with a sad expression. Do you know how important buttocks are to a woman? As the saying goes, women with big buttocks are the best at bearing children. If this important part of mine is injured, I might not be able to get married. You don't understand. What kind of twisted logic is this? And why don't I understand? This old lady here is a woman too. Hey, you actually want to get married. Why the hell are you cultivating as a deity? Don't worry, this little bit of injury will not affect your female functions. Next month, you will still be able to have your period. Period? What's that? Her face was filled with curiosity. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Period. Oh. She suddenly came to a realization. A moment later, her face paled again, and she said with a nervous look, Sovereign, but I have not had my period for several hundred years. Will this affect it? What should she do if she wanted to kick her off the sword? In the end, the 2 of them still returned to Forgotten God Palace. They were not worried that the Heavenly Feather Clan would chase after them. After all, this was the territory of human practitioners, and a mere plaque was not enough to cause a dispute. when you looked at the two travel-worn people a little dumbfoundedly. Old ancestor, you too returned from your training so quickly? It had only been a day and a night, right? Zhu Yao patted on his shoulders. Life is just that unpredictable. When you still wanted to ask something, but Zhu Yao silently took out that doo-doo and stuffed it back to him. What about private hobbies like this next time? Don't spread it around. If the other sects find out about it, it won't be good for your reputation. Wen Yu was instantly petrified. When he regained his senses, the master and disciple duo had already disappeared. What private hobbies? No, old ancestor, listen to my explanation. I'm so tired. The moment they entered, Ying Luo laid on the bed, looking as though she was half dead. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. What the hell are you tired for? She was the one who fought and flew on the sword. Hey. Oh right. Hurry and keep that mystic artifact. She immediately sat up and picked up the storage pouch that Zhu Yao threw on the table. Where's the jade tablet? Here. Zhu Yao handed it over. Ying Luo immediately stored it in. Just as she was about to tighten the string, the jade tablet suddenly fell out. She was startled, and then threw the jade tablet in again. In the next moment, the jade tablet fell out again. She threw it again, and it continued to fall. What's going on? Ying Luo reached into the pouch and suddenly cried out. Aya, it's so hot. Yu Yao, what did you put inside? Zhu Yao took over the pouch and looked at it. You took the wrong one. It's not this. She immediately took out the metal spirit from the pouch. Chick, chick. The metal spirit cried out pitifully and rolled around in her hands. Zhu Yao sighed, grabbed the other storage pouch, and threw it to Ying Luo. Leave the jade tablet here. This fellow doesn't like to stay with other mystic artifacts. What's that? It looks pretty good. Ying Luo curiously looked at her palm. Is it an egg? What kind of egg is that? Chick. The metal spirit let out a protest sound. Egg? Chick, 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 chick. The metal spirit instantly grew anxious as it jumped up and slammed towards her face. Ying Luo could not dodge in time and was smashed right into her face. Yo, you're pretty arrogant, aren't you? I'll cook you today. Ying Luo pretended to grab it. The metal spirit's figure flashed, and in an instant, its entire body emitted out a golden light. Chick! In an instant, all of the mystic artifacts on their bodies flew out and floated in the air. Every single one of them were aimed at Ying Luo with killing intent. Ying Luo was instantly dumbfounded. Enough, enough. Zhu Yao hurriedly extinguished the fire and placed the metal spirit back into the storage pouch. Those mystic artifacts landed on the ground. Don't provoke it. It has a bad temper. Wah. Ying Luo patted on her chest and simply could not believe her own eyes. Just what is this? Metal spirit. Metal spirit? She had a confused look. This chicken of yours sure is incredible. It can actually control mystic artifacts. I already said it's not a chicken, but control? Zhu Yao was startled. The metal spirit was formed from metal spiritual energy, and a large majority of mystic artifacts did indeed belong to the metal attribute. It was very normal for the metal spirit to be able to control them. In that case, if those 5 mystic artifacts were, I know how to find the remaining ones. Zhu Yao suddenly stood up. Ying Luo, where are the remaining 3 mystic artifacts? One is in Point Formation Clan, one is in the ancient ruins where the devil appeared, and the last one is in Sword-Seeking Peak. Sword-Seeking Peak? Zhu Yao was startled. Is it that Sword-Seeking Peak outside? Ying Luo nodded. Zhu Yao felt joy in her heart. Taking out the metal spirit, she said seriously. Metal spirit, is there a mystic artifact with a devil sealed in Sword-Seeking Peak? Chick? The rock in her palm tilted. Zhu Yao had no choice but to take out that jade tablet and fan. It's a mystic artifact with a similar aura as these two. Chick. It let out a long sound, as though it was pondering. A moment later, it rolled around. Chick, chick, chick. There is? Chick. Where is it? Can you bring me there to retrieve it? The metal spirit rubbed against her palm, and then, the entire rock once again began to emit out a golden light. Suddenly, it let out a long chick sound. Chick. That sound grew further and further away, as though it was summoning something. Before the two of them could even react, suddenly, 3 knocks sounded from the door. Knock, knock, knock. It was neither light nor heavy. Zhu Yao raised her hand and opened the door. A sword that was entirely black in color flew in and obediently landed on the table. Chick. The metal spirit instantly let out a dissatisfied sound. That sword then flew back to the door. Using its hilt to push the open doors shut, it then flew back to the table. Chapter 253. This sword has gained sentience, right? Luo said. It should be the metal spirit that had gained sentience. Zhu Yao picked up the sword on the table and inspected it carefully. Just like the other two, there was a surge of devilish energy, and there was even a talisman sealing it. 3 now. Mission completion rate, 3 of 5. The girl sighed. A hint of worry flashed past her face. Yu Yao, just what is the method you mentioned to get rid of the devil once and for all? Devil smiting inscription. Zhu Yao solemnly said, this is the one and only inscription art in this world that can exterminate devils. Exterminate? Luo was startled. Aren't devils undying and indestructible and can only be sealed? Believe me. Zhu Yao patted on her shoulders. There are no absolutes in everything. This method will definitely work. She had personally tried it before. Luo was silent for a moment. In the end, she still sighed and said with a smile, all right then, since I've already boarded this pirate ship of yours, I have no choice but to trust you till the end. Pirate ship? Was it too late to switch teammates? Where are we going next? Should we go to Point Formation Sect? She suddenly said with an excited expression. That place is rather close to Forgotten God Palace, and I've long heard that there's an elder in Point Formation Clan. He's a rare, handsome young master, and no matter if it's his character, cultivation, or looks, he's one of the best in the cultivation world. Zhu Yao glanced at the girl. You've fallen for him? Ah. Luo blanked for a moment. A moment later, she scratched her head and chuckled. Ho ho, I have met him several times in the past, and I'm not really familiar with him either. You like him? She blushed. Did you know? He has 4 spiritual roots, yet he could form his gold core with his own strength. He's very impressive. You've fallen for him. Her face was as red as blood. I have pentaspirit veins. Although my cultivation speed is not bad, it's also because I have an ancient bloodline. He comprehended it all by himself. You like him? Luo, a few seconds later. Yes, I like him. She looked like she was ready to throw caution to the wind. I want to have sex with him every minute. What do you think? Tisk, why didn't you say so earlier? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes. I have experience in this. Luo's eyes shone. Wah. What experience? Is there even a need to say it? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes even more joyfully. What other experience could it be? Of course it was the experience of being strong. The experience of pouncing on his master so many times was not for nothing. Luo's expression instantly straightened, as she said with utmost respect. I hope that Sovereign Yu Yao will not be stingy with your teachings. That's easy. Zhu Yao courteously waved her hand, poured herself a cup of tea, and casually asked, First, tell me, what's that elder's name? Her face started to turn red again, as if she had instantly put away her natural masculine nature and revealed a shy look. Her eyes shone as she said, his name is Ding Chuanxiu. Zhu Yao sprayed out a mouthful of tea all over her face. You NPCs, please choose your names properly. Zhu Yao asked when you about it, and found out that there was really someone called Ding Chuanxiu in Point Formation Sect. However, he was no longer an elder of Point Formation Sect, but a sect master. In the few hundred years when the girling Luo was sealed, he had been doing pretty well. Not only did he form his nascent soul, His reputation in the cultivation world was also rather resounding. Even Wonyu, an old man who had always harbored hatred towards other sects, was full of praises for him. Indeed, forming a nascent soul with 4 spirit veins was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. This sect Master Ding was a model example of hard work, and under his leadership, Point Formation Sect had already firmly planted its roots amongst the first-rate sections. Point Formation Sect was proficient in formations and belonged to a neutral sect. They would not participate in any sect's disputes, and because of this, many sects would invite people from Point Formation Sect to participate in setting up formations and give them pointers. This was also how Point Formation Sect got its name. It was rumored that the next inter-sect tournament would be held in Point Formation Sect. Zhu Yao had initially wanted to find the 4th mystic artifact as soon as possible, but after hearing Wen Yu's words, she changed her mind. Point Formation Sect's formations were profound, and if she were to barge in forcefully, there would definitely be the danger of exposing her identity. She did not mind, but the girling Luo would be in trouble. She might as well wait until the inter-sect tournament, and while there were many people in each sect, she could sneak in. At that time, it would be easier for her to find the mystic artifact. Coincidentally, there were still about 5 years before the next intersect tournament, and she could use this opportunity to let the girling Luo replenish her cultivation. In 5 years, you must form your Azoth core. Yeah, Ing Luo was shocked. 5 years, isn't that a little too short? You've already formed your Azoth core once. What's there to be afraid of? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes. It wasn't like she was cultivating from scratch, and her meridians had long reached the level of a nascent soul. Forget about 5 years, 3 years was more or less enough. Work hard. Didn't you fancy that guy with the surname Ding? The higher your cultivation, the greater your chances of success. That's true. She was instantly motivated and began to meditate with her legs crossed. Zhu Yao informed Wen Yu and released the news that she was going into closed-door training. After that, she sealed off the entire mountain peak and placed down 5 spiritual energy guiding formations around the girling Luo. As long as she entered a meditative state, the spiritual energy on the mountain peak would be 10 times denser than usual. She wondered if it was because of the presence of the metal spirit, but the metal spiritual energy was especially dense. Actually, it was very easy for the girl to raise her cultivation. Because she had trained once before, she basically did not have any bottlenecks from the early stages of foundation to the paragon. The only thing she lacked was spiritual energy. With the replenishment of spiritual energy, she naturally raised her cultivation very quickly. In less than 3 years, she had already reached the paragon level. Next would be forming her Azoth core, and this would have to depend on the girl's own comprehension. On the 4th year of her closed-door training, Zhu Yao faintly sensed an abnormal movement in the spiritual energy. She was about to form her Azoth core. She once again strengthened the surrounding spiritual energy guiding formations, and even released the metal spirit in order to maintain a sufficient amount of spiritual energy. Ing Luo's expression, however, grew even worse. Large droplets of sweat dripped down from her forehead, as though she was enduring an extremely great pain. Even her spiritual energy was a little chaotic. Zhu Yao stood guard at the side without moving. Initially, she thought that there would be no problems, but she saw her expression grow even worse. The spiritual energy was actually scattering even more violently, as though it would scatter the moment it entered her body. Her brows were deeply knitted together, and a hint of death aura could faintly be seen. What was going on? This was different from what was written in the script. Girling Luo, she anxiously shouted out. This situation was evidently the result of her restless state of mind. Conceal your spiritual energy, focus your mind, and calm your heart. Focus on forming your Azoth core, and don't let your thoughts run wild. At such a crucial moment, what was she thinking about? Her situation, however, was worsening. Even the corner of her lips was leaking out traces of blood, and the spiritual energy in her body was already in a mess. The hell? She was here to save her, not to end her prematurely. Taking a deep breath, Zhu Yao could no longer care about the backlash. She immediately materialized a strand of divine sense and forcefully entered her meridians. She guided the chaotic spiritual energy to circulate. Then, she casually entered the place where she was forming her Azoth core, only to realize that the spiritual energy there was even more chaotic. The moment she entered, as though the chaotic spiritual energy had found its target, it began to wildly attack her divine sense. Zhu Yao was about to puke blood from the pain. Yet, she had no choice but to grit her teeth and persevere. If this girl was going to die, then she would have come here for nothing. Gritting her teeth, she used all of her strength to control the chaotic spiritual energy. Then, following the method of forming her Azoth core, she guided the spiritual energy to revolve in a single direction, forming a whirlpool. In the beginning, it was extremely difficult. Because it was not her own body, she was basically unable to control the spiritual energy, and the backlash became even more severe. After circulating it a few times with great difficulty, it slowly became orderly, and she no longer needed to forcefully guide it. And at the center of the spiritual energy, there was already a faint 5-color dot, and it was slowly solidifying and growing bigger. Only then did Zhu Yao retract her divine sense, but she puked out a mouthful of blood. Earlier, she did not feel much pain, but now that she had retracted it, the pain instantly spread throughout her entire body, and she felt as though her soul was being bitten a few times. She had no choice but to close her eyes, take a deep breath, and meditate. Circulating spiritual energy, she slowly nurtured her divine sense. It was too goddamn painful. She felt as though she had died once. It was even more painful than when she was a demigod back then. After meditating for an entire day, Zhu Yao was finally able to catch her breath. At the side, Ying Luo had coincidentally completed her Azoth core as well, and she opened her eyes. She turned to look at her, and as though she was stunned for a moment, her eyes sank, and there seemed to be tears flashing within. Yu Yao. Thank you. Zhu Yao waved her hand. It's good that you're fine. Seriously, even forming your Azoth core doesn't make me feel at ease. Why did you suddenly get distracted? Her expression changed, and a moment later, she said seriously, It won't happen again. There's still a next time? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at her. Do you think anyone can form their Azoth core twice like you? Of course, she was an exception. That's true. She grinned, and then manly slapped her. I'm not that unlucky. After being slapped by her, Zhu Yao opened her mouth and puked out another mouthful of blood. Take note of the handicapped. Hey, I'm sorry. She repeatedly apologized. Her face was filled with guilt. Never mind. That blood was something she wanted to puke out in the first place. Are you certain that you have formed your Azoth core? Of course. She nodded. I'm completely fine now. That's good. I want to stay away from you. Zhu Yao crawled away. Wait a minute. Ying Luo dragged her back. You're already injured. Where are you going? You should hurry and meditate to recuperate. I can't sit here. Why? Because, boom, a bolt of Azoth core tribulation lightning struck down from above Ying Luo's head. However, at the instant it was about to land on the ground, it made a turn and landed on the person next to her. Zhu Yao, who was struck black at the side, puffing out a mouthful of black smoke. She looked at Ying Luo with dead fish eyes. This is the reason. Ying Luo. Immediately after, the second bolt of tribulation lightning struck down with a loud boom. Just as it was about to strike Zhu Yao, she raised her head and glared at it. Are you done yet? Creak. The tribulation lightning stopped in midair. It could not go up, nor could it go down. It had really gotten addicted to striking her, right? Just who's going to form her Azoth core? That bolt of tribulation lightning seemed to be extremely conflicted. It creaked and twisted above Ying Luo's head, then creaked and twisted above Zhu Yao's head. It spun back and forth a few times, as though it was dancing. A moment later, as though it had finally found a compromise, it suddenly turned into a thin streak of light that could not be seen clearly. Then, it spat on her face. And then, it disappeared with satisfaction. The subsequent bolts of tribulation lightning struck like cannons. Only after a total of 81 bolts did it calm down. Zhu Yao, this tribulation lightning definitely has a grudge against me. It won't let me go even after this. Ing Luo. So this is the lightning spirit vein? How mystical. The girl Ing Luo had formed her Azoth core, but the one being struck was still her. There were still 365 days until the next intersect tournament. Zhu Yao used this time to help her improve a few of her arts and strengthen her sword arts. Regretfully, the girl did not comprehend sword intent. Thinking about it, things like sword intent depended on luck as well. Back then, she only comprehended it when she was on the verge of death. Of course, just in case, Zhu Yao taught her a few sealing arts as well. Forcefully activating the seal with spiritual energy will bring great harm to your body. Unless absolutely necessary, do not use it lightly. I understand, girl. Ing Luo patted on her chest. Oh right, is the devil smiting inscription the same? The devil smiting inscription is different from others. Zhu Yao explained with a sunken voice. Even a god can only use this seal once in their entire lives. If we were to use it, we'll be done for. It's that amazing? Ing Luo was startled for a moment, before nodding. Don't worry about me. Why was she even more worried now? A year later, the intersect tournament. Ing Luo, this is Point Formation Clan. That's right, the mountain behind Point Formation Clan. You know where the mystic artifacts are? I don't, but most mystic artifacts are kept in the spiritual artifact warehouse. Then what about the spiritual artifact warehouse? I say, girl Yu Yao, as a mighty first-rate deity sect, there are naturally countless mystic artifacts and treasures. How can it be that easy to find them? You have to be patient. I do have patience, but can you explain to me, what does finding mystic artifacts have to do with lying here and peeking at other people bathing? The corner of Ing Luo's lips twitched. A hint of awkwardness flashed past her eyes. She chuckled and said, Girl Yu Yao, I'm just passing by. It's great to have a feast for my eyes. Zhu Yao glanced at her, and then pointed in the opposite direction. But the spiritual artifact warehouse that we asked about is over there. Her expression stiffened, and she waved her hand. Don't mind such details. It's hard to not mind, all right? The hell? This old lady here has been squatting next to this bathtub for an hour. You didn't even plan on finding mystic artifacts in the first place, and you're purely here to peek at other people bathing, right? I'm leaving. If you want to pervert, go ahead. Please don't trample on my pride as a pure girl. Ha! Don't. If you leave, I will definitely be discovered. Just treat it as helping me out, girl Yu Yao, big sis Yu Yao, sovereign Yu Yao, Aunt Yu Yao, your sister's aunt. She definitely can't tolerate this. Zhu Yao walked faster and faster. Yu Yao. The girl was still struggling when she suddenly blanked. Someone's here. She didn't want to look. Yeah, he's taking off his clothes. She wasn't interested in a man's body at all. Yeah, he's even taking off his pants. Where? How's his figure? Does he have an 8-pack? Zhu Yao returned like a gust of wind and squatted next to Ing Luo. Chapter 254. Ing Luo chuckled and pointed at the pond in front of them. Sure enough, a man had appeared over there. His back was facing the two of them, and his shirt had been taken off, revealing a large portion of his bronze-colored skin. He was quite tall, and his upper body formed a perfect inverted triangle. He seemed to be undoing his pants, and after a while, he pulled out a belt. Clearly hearing Ing Luo suck in a cold breath, the corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She silently passed a handkerchief over. Wipe off the nosebleed. Oh. Ing Luo mechanically received it, however. She wiped off the blood on her face. Did it have to be so exaggerated? Wasn't he still wearing his underwear? Zhu Yao shook her head and looked at that figure a little disdainfully. I'm not as tall as Master. His skin wasn't as white as his master's. His muscles weren't as sturdy as his master's. Substandard product appraisal complete. A large part of her curiosity from earlier had already disappeared, though Ing Luo's breathing grew more and more hurried, and her face looked like an infatuated fool. The hell? Are you even drooling now? In any case, you're a goddess-like girl. Don't walk the strange, idiotic path. He's the man you fancy? A thought flashed in Zhu Yao's mind as she asked. Ing Luo was startled for a moment. Only when that man, whose back was facing them, had already submerged into the pool, and only his head was left, did he turn his head back and gave her an embarrassed chuckle. Damn, it really is that NPC called Ding Chuanxiu. Isn't he the head of Point Formation sect? Why are you here instead of greeting the other sects? It's time for lunch break, Ing Luo said with a serious look. The spiritual energy in this spring is abundant. Every afternoon, he would come to this mountain spring and soak for 2 hours. How did you know? Zhu Yao sized her up for a moment. Tell me honestly, just how long have you been lying here and secretly peeping at me? Ing Luo's expression stiffened, and a moment later, she replied. Ho, matters like this aren't important anymore. How is it not important? Actually, it hasn't been that long. Her face flushed red as she stammered. It's only been since he joined Point Formation sect. Fuck. It's been a few hundred years since then, right? How dare you say that not too long ago? You're obviously not a fool. You're committing a crime. Then why don't you just chase after him? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at her. She was the palace mistress of Forgotten God Palace in the past, and her position was second only to the palace master. Furthermore, she had a face like that. Any rational man would find it hard to reject her, right? Ing Luo scratched her head. In the past, his cultivation level was low. I was afraid that it would affect his reputation, and now, even more so, she didn't want others to say that he relied on a woman to get to where he was, right? Zhu Yao pouted. She did not really understand the thought processes of these people. In her opinion, matters of the heart were very simple. If you like someone, then you like him. Was the opinion of others that important? It's not like I've spent it with someone else. If the other half really valued something as illusory as reputation more than feelings, then it could only prove that she was blind. Next time, it would be better if she could see clearly. Why did he have to cower and torment himself? My girl Yu Yao, I just want to look at him from afar. Just treat it as helping me out. Ing Luo patted on her shoulder and said with a heroic look, At most, if you like any man in the future, I'll help you peek at him as well. Scram. Zhu Yao could not hold it in any longer as she sent a kick over. This old lady's man doesn't need you to accompany me to look at him. She has already eaten him up, all right? Aya. Ing Luo lost her balance, and her figure tilted, adding that she had squatted for too long. Her legs were a little numb. Unable to react in time, her feet slipped, and with a splash, she fell head first into the pool, causing a huge splash. With such a loud sound, no matter how powerful their aura-concealing talismans were, they would definitely be exposed. As expected, a clear male voice sounded from the other side. Who? Zhu Yao reached out her hand, wanting to pull the girl and flee. However, the girl who was still struggling in the water earlier, upon hearing the question, was so frightened that she suddenly stood up and loudly said, We didn't peek at you bathing. Zhu Yao, Ding Chuanxiu, Ing Luo, I wonder if it's too late to pretend that I don't know her now? A violent gust of wind blew, and in an instant, several wind blades attacked the two of them. Zhu Yao immediately waved her hand, materializing a defensive barrier. Then, she swiftly lifted the girl Ing Luo who was in the water up. The wind blades struck the surface of the water, causing a huge splash, which was blocked by the barrier in time. Who are you people? The voice from earlier once again sounded. From the direction of the splash, a man dressed in black robes, who was clearly neatly dressed, was currently walking over. Ing Luo stiffened for a moment. In an instant, with a swoosh, she hid behind Zhu Yao's back like a mouse. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. You coward! The splash of water fell, revealing the true appearance of the man who had his back facing them the entire time. Zhu Yao, however, was startled. She fiercely widened her eyes and looked straight at him. The hell? Which sect are you people from? The man looked at them. She did not know if it was her imagination, but a hint of shock actually leaked out from the depths of his eyes. A moment later, he said, I wonder why the two of you have come to the back mountain of my Point Formation clan? Zhu Yao did not speak and simply stared at his face without blinking. Ding Chuanxiu could not help but frown a little unhappily. Probably because Ing Luo had sensed Zhu Yao's abnormality, she nudged her from the back. Seeing that Zhu Yao still had no reaction, she anxiously decided to confess. We didn't mean to steal. We're disciples of Forgotten God Palace, and we lost our way. Zhu Yao suddenly reacted and began to lie through her teeth. Before she came here, she had long changed her appearance and concealed her cultivation level. In the eyes of others, they were merely two Azoth core disciples. After walking for a while, we ended up here. We have disturbed Sect Master Ding. I hope Senior can forgive us. Ding Chuanxiu once again looked at the two of them. A moment later, a hint of a courteous smile surfaced on his face, as though he had accepted their explanation. So you're disciples of Forgotten God Palace. Speaking of which, Forgotten God Palace and I can be considered to have a rather deep relationship. The previous palace master of your esteemed sect and I. What a pity. His eyes suddenly turned blank, as though he had recalled something, and he sighed. Zhu Yao clearly felt the girl's hand, which was grabbing onto her clothes, tighten for a moment. Since the two of you don't recognize the terrain of this mountain, then follow me. As he said that, he turned around and made an inviting gesture, before leading the way at the front. His black robe still carried a little warmth, and there were still droplets of water dripping from his hair, yet he looked indescribably warm and gentle. However, Ing Luo could no longer hold it in, as she sent a voice transmission to Zhu Yao, crazily spamming the screen in her mind. My girl Yu Yao, he remembers me. He actually remembers me as well. Shut up. Zhu Yao turned to glare at her, and casually cast an art on her to dry this scalding chicken. Only then did she pull her and follow after the person in front of her. Looking at Ing Luo's infatuated expression, for no reason, a wave of anger began to rise in her heart. That Ding Chuanxiu led them to the front hall, pointed to the place where the disciples of the various sects and clans were staying for the tournament held by Forgotten God Palace this time, and then he bid his farewell. He did not mention a single word about the two of them being rude and peeping on him earlier, looking like a gentleman. Ing Luo's eyes looked at him the entire time, and even when he disappeared, the redness on her face did not fade. In the end, Zhu Yao could no longer hold it in. Taking a step forward, she pressed onto her shoulders and pulled her back. Ing Luo, if I tell you to give up on this thought, forget about him, and stay far away from him, will you listen? Ing Luo was startled. She sized her up for a moment, and seeing that Zhu Yao did not have the slightest intention of joking, her heart sank, and she said in a fluster, My girl Yu Yao, you can't have fallen for him as well, right? Bullshit. Zhu Yao glared at her. How could this old lady fall for him? Only a fool like you would treat him as a treasure. Even if he gave her a dozen, she wouldn't even care, all right? Then why did you? No matter what, in any case, the two of you definitely cannot be together. My girl Yu Yao. She stared straight at her. Suddenly, as though she had thought of something, her eyes widened even wider. With a shocked expression, she said, You can't have fallen for me, right? Zhu Yao raised her leg and kicked towards her. Scram! But why in the world? Ing Luo rubbed her sore buttocks, looking confused. At the very least, you have to give me a reason, right? Zhu Yao sank into silence. The frustration in the depths of her heart grew even stronger. After a long while, she slowly said, One day, you will be harmed to death by him. She would really be harmed to death. Because in that scenario, she had once clearly witnessed that man leading the various sects to surround and attack the girl, and he even stabbed his sword into the girl's chest. Back then, even she could sense the desolation and despair Zhu Yao felt. If the betrayal of the people was the reason for the girl's resentment, then that Ding Chuanxiu was the fuse that triggered everything. Previously, she did not understand why in the scenario the girl gave her. Although she could understand everything, everyone's faces were unclear, except for that Ding Chuanxiu. Only his face could be seen clearly in the plot. Looking at it now, it wasn't because that person gave her a fatal blow, but because that person occupied an important position in her life. Ying Luo's refusal to answer her was within her expectations. No matter who it was, if they heard a sentence similar to how the Adonis you have a crush on was trash, they would probably want to hang the other party up and beat them up. She should be glad that Ying Luo did not cut off all ties with her, and instead began to chat with her about the past. Yu Yao, you don't know, but we're different from other practitioners. Yu Yao, you don't know, but my life in the past wasn't easy. He's actually the same as me. We're the same type of people. Yu Yao, you don't know, but from the very first day he entered the deity sect, I had already decided to do my best to help him. Yu Yao, you don't know how hard it is for a person to live without any hope. Zhu Yao indeed did not know, but she knew, in the future, just how great of a price this silly child would have to pay for this trust. Ying Luo, then let me ask you, if one day he objects to you searching for the mystic artifact and tries his best to stop you from dealing with that devil, what will you choose? Zhu Yao only asked this one question. That's different. This is a huge matter in the world. No matter what, the matter with the devil must be resolved. With a determined look, she said word by word. Chapter 255. Ever since then, the two of them sealed the matter regarding Ding Chuanxiu, and with a tacit understanding, they no longer mentioned this person. They began to diligently search for that mystic artifact in Point Formation Clan. There were many people participating in the intersect tournament this time. Zhu Yao and Ying Luo had secretly followed them here and concealed their identities, so when you did not know of them. However, for some reason, they simply could not find the shadow of the mystic artifact. She had even had the metal spirit search for it, but it was to no avail. The girl said that the mystic artifact this time was a jade bamboo flute, made from 1,000-year-old jade bamboo, and was a wood-type mystic artifact. It was normal for the metal spirit to not be able to sense it. Just when they were at their wits' end, they bumped into that trash again. Fellow Taoists, we meet again. Ding Chuanxiu nodded towards the two of them with a courteous smile. Ying Luo's face unwillingly reddened, as she habitually hid behind Zhu Yao. Why aren't the two of you watching the tournament at the front hall? We're just about to head over. Zhu Yao replied as she sized him up. Why isn't Sect Master Ding hosting the tournament at the front, and instead strolling around here? He smiled, as though he did not mind her rudeness in the slightest. He slowly said, I'm just about to head to the front hall as well, and coincidentally bumped into the two of you, so I came over to greet you on the way. Zhu Yao rolled her eyes. She did not believe that he would be so kind. This humble one simply feels a sense of familiarity when I see a disciple of Forgotten God Palace. He sighed, as though he had recalled something from the past. Back then, I was still a mere foundation disciple, and under a stroke of luck, I even received guidance from an expert in your esteemed sect. Unfortunately, my benefactor was harmed by the devil. When Ying Luo heard that, her eyes instantly shone. Sect Master Ding, you're talking about Ying Luo? Palace Mistress. That's right. Ding Chuanxiu took a step forward and said with a sincere gaze, Palace Mistress Ying Luo is not only my benefactor, she is also the benefactor of the entire cultivation world. The girl instantly smiled till her eyes were curved. Sect Master Ding, you flatter me. No, this is what she deserves. However, he firmly said, this humble one has always wished to see her again. If she were to, He sighed with a pained expression. The girl seemed to want to say something, but Zhu Yao reached out her hand and pulled her. Don't be rash, girl. Don't trust a trash so easily. The reason why he sees you again is because he wants to kill you. Sect Leader Ding, You're really a good person who knows how to repay kindness. Zhu Yao smiled and deliberately emphasized the words, know how to repay kindness. Ding Chuanqiu smiled, apparently not understanding her sarcasm. It's a pity that she's already gone. I'm just sad for her. I can't even repay him even if I want to. The only thing I can do now is to protect the magic tool that my benefactor used to seal the demons with his life. Zhu Yao was startled as she turned to exchange glances with Ing Luo. Sect Master Ding, are you talking about one of the 5 mystic artifacts? Ing Luo took a step forward and asked. Yes. He nodded. My sect guards the emerald bamboo flute. Thank you for your hard work, sect leader Ding. The devil race is extremely dangerous, Ing Luo said in a seemingly casual manner. Even that artifact belonging to my forgotten god palace had no choice but to be placed in sword-seeking peak and be suppressed by the sword auras of numerous spiritual swords. The devil race has already been sealed. There's nothing to fear. Ding Chuanqiu frowned, as though he was extremely displeased with her worrying about the heavens. Just what sort of person is Senior Ing Luo? Since the devil race has already been sealed by her, how could it possibly escape? Furthermore, with my point formation clan's heavenly astral subduing formation, it's easier said than done to escape Descending Spirit Peak. Descending Spirit Peak. Done. Zhu Yao silently gave the girl a thumbs up. After exchanging a few more pleasantries with Ding Chuanqiu, the two of them left. She had finally found out his exact location. Yu Yao, I feel that we can tell Sect Master Ding the truth about this matter. Ing Luo said a little hesitantly. I believe that with his personality, he will understand. Zhu Yao's heart clenched. She pulled the girl and sternly said, No, you must never let him know of your identity. Girl, don't be silly. Ing Luo sighed and said with a stern look as well. Yu Yao, he really isn't a bad person. You can even believe me when we've just met. So why can't you believe him? Because this old lady here is here to save you. Zhu Yao sighed deeply. She felt that it was about time for her to have a chat with the girl about life. Otherwise, she was really afraid that her head would turn hot-headed and she would bravely advance towards love. Girl, it's been almost 1,000 years. I believe that in your impression, he's a good person. But how can you be sure that he's still the same? Zhu Yao said word by word. People change. She frowned, and only after a while did she say, I know what you mean, but you saw it for yourself earlier. When he talked about me, he was truly grateful to me and wanted to repay me. He wasn't faking it. Although there might not be any personal feelings, his intentions were sincere. All right, I admit it. Earlier, he was indeed sincere. Zhu Yao nodded. Ing Luo's eyes shone a little, however. She changed the topic. But how can you be sure that if he knew everything, he would believe your words? Ing Luo was startled. Wasn't this very obvious? Since he believed her, naturally he would. Girl. Zhu Yao said with a heavy heart. Gratitude doesn't mean that he will definitely repay you. There's another phrase in this world, called biting the hand that feeds you. Ing Luo's eyes widened as she looked at her with a little fury. The corner of her lips moved as she wanted to refute. I know you're going to say that he's not. Zhu Yao interrupted her words. She did not mind using the greatest evil to guess the people of this world because she had long seen the future. However, Ing Luo did not know. No one can say for sure what will happen in the future, so I won't argue with you about things that have yet to happen. Let's talk about the past. He kept saying that you're his benefactor and that he has always wanted to repay you. Unfortunately, he no longer has the chance. But is there really no more? She died back then, so there indeed wasn't any. Zhu Yao continued. He also said that he feels a sense of closeness towards the disciples of Forgotten God Palace, because you're from Forgotten God Palace. Don't you think that's inconsistent? Ing Luo looked confused. Ing Luo, if it's you, a person has done you a great favor. However, that person has died. If you wish to repay him, what would you do? Zhu Yao smiled. Only then did Ing Luo seem to understand. and her eyes instantly darkened. You will take care of his family, and will do your best to help those people whom the benefactor cares about. But, Zhu Yao continued, Forgotten God Palace has been oppressed by the various sects for so many years. From its leading position in the cultivation world, to its current state where it cannot even maintain its position as a first-rate deity sect, has any sect stood out to say a single word? As a sect master, on one hand, he feels a sense of closeness towards Forgotten God Palace, but on the other hand, he pretended to be deaf and dumb and did nothing to save them? Is this really what one should do to repay a debt of gratitude? If he simply wishes to repay you alone, then why would he say words like he's treating Forgotten God Palace especially generously? In the end, he simply knows a debt of gratitude and does not want to repay it. Ing Luo, calm down and think about it carefully. If he knew that you've already been revived, would he really stand on your side without any hesitation? Or should I ask, if he knew everything, would this debt of gratitude still exist? Ing Luo turned silent. For a long while, she did not say a single word, as her brows deeply furrowed. Zhu Yao knew that she would not be able to wrap her head around it in such a short period of time. To completely overthrow the person whom she had believed in for so long, forget about her, even she herself would feel the same. If she heard someone telling her that her master or little wimp would harm her, she would most likely charge forward and fight with the person who spread the rumor. Ing Luo's silence could already be considered as having a very good temper. Ing Luo thought about it for an entire day. Only when night fell did she finally come to look for her. I've thought about it. She once again returned to the look of a naked young girl, as she slapped towards her back. I know you have your reasons, but I'm unable to believe it. After all, I haven't seen it with my own eyes, so I still wish to retain my trust. I won't tell him the truth. Let's first obtain the mystic artifact before thinking about all these nonsense. Zhu Yao nodded. She understood that everyone had their own principles and perseverance. Furthermore, she chuckled. I haven't even developed anything with him yet. It seems a little too early to talk about these now. Ha! Why is it so hard to find a man that's pleasing to the eye in this world? Zhu Yao patted on her shoulders and said with a stern look, You must believe that true love still exists in this world. As long as you wield the hoe well, there won't be any corners. Apui. No, wait. As long as you put in the effort, even an iron rod can be ground into a needle. Something was still a little strange. There's a huge group of good men waiting for you up ahead. That's true. She stroked her own face. With my flowery beauty, there's no reason for me to not be able to find a man. She suddenly turned to size her up. You, however, are in a little danger. Scram. Zhu Yao gave her a kick. Hurry and head to that whatever descending spirit peak. Understood. They had already inquired about it during the day. Descending Spirit Peak of Point Formation Clan was a forbidden ground, and even the sect's disciples were not allowed to casually approach it. Hence, they had no choice but to wait until nightfall before making their move. Earlier, Zhu Yao had concealed herself to investigate the terrain. The peak was filled with formations, and there was only a single tall building at the peak. The formations inside were even tighter. Most likely, that mystic artifact was inside. Zhu Yao immediately brought Ing Luo and entered from the back of the mountain. Along the way, she carefully avoided the numerous formations and finally arrived in front of that building. The formations on the peak were still manageable, but the formation on the building's door was the heavenly astral descent formation that Ding Chuanqiu had mentioned before. It was formed by several hundred formations of different sizes. It was basically impossible to enter without spending a few days to dispel the formation. Zhu Yao studied it for a moment, but she still did not know what to do. Perhaps we can try that method from before and merge into an I formation? Ing Luo suggested. No way. Zhu Yao shook her head. This formation is different from the barrier from before. Though the barrier is very strong, it only separates a single formation. This array formation was originally formed by hundreds of arrays. Pulling one of them would cause the entire array to move. If there's even the slightest movement, it will immediately activate. Though with her demigod cultivation, she was not afraid of this formation. When the time comes, the commotion would definitely attract people from the various sections. Chapter 256. Let's find the weakest part of the formation first. This array covered the entire building, so there would definitely be a secret door, which was the place where the array was weaker. Zhu Yao carefully circled around this tower, only to hear Ying Luo's voice transmission from above. "It's here." She rode on her sword and flew up. Sure enough, she saw a spot on the roof where the spiritual aura was obviously weaker than the rest. However, there was a wind chime formation there. "My granddaddy!" Ying Luo could not help but curse out. The wind chime array was different from other arrays. It had almost no offensive function, but as long as the array was touched, it would produce a loud bell-like sound. If they were to enter from here, it would be obvious to the others that someone had barged in to snatch the Dharma artifact. "My girl Yu Yao, what do you think? What should we do? I remember this building is made of wood." She suddenly asked a completely unrelated question. Ying Luo blanked for a moment, before nodding. "That's right. Are you good at wood elemental spells?" It's all right. That's fine," Zhu Yao said. "You just have to directly accelerate the growth of this wooden building and have all of the wood awaken. Then, you just have to desperately grow them." "You're saying?" Ying Luo's eyes shone. Zhu Yao nodded. The defense on the outside of this building was very tight, and it was very hard to enter from the outside. However, opening it from the inside would be a different story. This building was made of wood, so the array formation would not be on guard against it. If the wood inside started to sprout and grow, the array formation would not be triggered. As long as the wooden building opened an entrance on its own, the array formation would be useless. However, this method could only be used by those with a wood spirit root. Even if her thunder spirit root converted spiritual energy, it would more or less carry the aura of thunder spiritual energy, which would be easily detected by the formation. And Ying Luo possessed the Penta spirit veins, so it was perfect for her to take action. Ying Luo cast a wood-type mystic art and circulated her spiritual energy. Suddenly, not even a moment later, green sprouts began to emerge from the wood on the entire rooftop, and they grew even more luxuriant. Slowly, they gathered towards their direction and began to intertwine with one another. In the end, they turned into a circular passageway formed by trees. It stretched out directly from the roof, as if it had forcefully opened a hole in the formation. "All right, let's go in." Ying Luo was overjoyed, as she had already flown in first. Zhu Yao paused for a moment. She looked at this passageway, and at the entrance below, which was still a little frightening. Suddenly, she had a feeling that everything had come too easily. Was she imagining things? "My girl Yu Yao, hurry and come," Ying Luo urged from inside. Zhu Yao suppressed the doubts in the depths of her heart and followed in. Since they entered from the top floor, they were on the top floor. There were a few spirit swords inside, but there was no target magic weapon. The two of them continued their search until they reached the first floor. Only then did they see a dark green flute placed on a high platform. Black chi constantly flowed around the body of the flute, and golden characters could be seen faintly on it. "Found it." Zhu Yao looked at the flute, and the bad premonition in the depths of her heart grew even stronger. "I just feel that this journey has been too smooth." The mystic artifact back then went rather smoothly too, didn't it? Ying Luo said. That was true. Ying Luo took a step forward. Just as she was about to take that flute, formations suddenly flashed in the surroundings. "Be careful." Zhu Yao casually pulled, and immediately pulled her away. At the place where she was standing earlier, chains instantly appeared and flew up. They flew towards the center, and if she had not pulled them fast enough, Ying Luo would have already been locked up. She was startled as well. Earlier, there were completely no ripples of formations in the building. Just how did this formation appear? Hurry and dodge. The four chains from earlier did not stop, and instead, chased after the two of them. Zhu Yao gave her a push, pushing her a few feet away, and then she leapt backwards. Coincidentally, she had retreated to the entrance, and just as she was about to cast an art to restrain the four chains, Ing Luo suddenly shouted out with a pale face. Yu Yao! Zhu Yao could not react in time, and in the next moment, she simply felt something charging straight at her back, heavily striking her back. Unknowingly, the door to the building had already opened, and a large amount of red light shone, instantly illuminating the entire building. Zhu Yao puked out a mouthful of blood, and simply felt a ringing sound resounding next to her ears. It was especially ear-piercing, and for no reason, it could cause one's heart to tremble. Ing Luo could no longer endure it, as she puked out a mouthful of blood. Girly! Zhu Yao endured the pain, and wanted to head over. Suddenly, a string of copper bells flew in, and the ear-piercing sounds endlessly came from within. Furthermore, the copper bells grew larger, and in an instant, they filled the entire floor. Zhu Yao had no choice but to fly out of the building, only to see that nascent soul practitioners from various sects had long gathered outside, and the one leading them was Ding Chuanxiu. The hell? She just knew that people called Ding Chuanxiu weren't good people. She finally understood what was amiss about earlier. The formations in this building were all to prevent people from entering, and not to prevent people from exiting. If it was truly to guard a mystic artifact, it was impossible for it to only prevent people from entering and not exiting. Ding Chuanxiu had long planned it, and was just waiting for them to deliver themselves to his doorstep. The moment Zhu Yao flew out, the building had already collapsed. The copper bells flew out, and had already grown to the height of a human. The ringing of the bells reverberated, and the copper bells actually began to slowly turn transparent, revealing an absolute beauty in a green robe and green skirt. Girly! Zhu Yao was stunned. Since when was she locked in the copper bells? And she had even recovered her original appearance. Ing Luo, as I thought. It's that dead Ing Luo? The crowd let out cries of shock. How could she possibly come back to life? Didn't her soul scatter a long time ago? Then what about the devil? Did she come back to life as well? Heavens, that other woman can't be a devil, right? It's no wonder they're here to snatch the mystic artifact. Everyone, Ding Chuanxiu suddenly said loudly. Ing Luo has already been bewitched by the devil, and has already turned into a devil. For the sake of all living beings in the world, we definitely cannot let these two devils off today. When the crowd heard this, they drew out their own weapons one after another, looking as though they were planning to go all out. Zhu Yao puked out blood from anger. She just knew that the moment the girl's identity was exposed, these people would gang up on her. If it were any other time, she really wouldn't place these people in her eyes. However, that strange copper bell earlier had instantly shattered her dantian, and it was already not bad that she was able to hold on. Yu Yao. Ing Luo's voice transmission suddenly sounded in the depths of her heart. Take the emerald bamboo flute and leave. Remember what you promised me, to completely eliminate the devil. The hell, girly, do you have to be such a saint? And now, you're still thinking about the devil. Those people are the ones who want to kill you. I'm a dead person in the first place. As though she knew what she was thinking, her voice sunk. Hurry and leave. If your identity is exposed, it will affect Forgotten God Palace. Zhu Yao turned to look at the flute in the ruins, and then turned to look at Ing Luo, who was already surrounded and attacked by the various sects in the copper bell. Gritting her teeth, she swung her sword to deflect a nascent soul practitioner who was attacking her. She immediately summoned her sword intent. A lightning phoenix instantly soared into the sky. Its sharp cry instantly resounded through the clouds, suppressing the sound of the copper bell. With a twist of Zhu Yao's hand, that lightning phoenix charged straight towards the copper bell. With a cracking sound, a crack appeared on the copper bell. She immediately flew over and reached out her hand to pass through that crack. In an instant, her right hand felt as though it was being pierced by thousands of steel needles, and the pain was unbearable. Yet, she had no choice but to endure it, as she desperately pulled the girling Luo out. When she looked at her palm again, it was already a bloody mess. It really fucking hurts. Zhu Yao recalled her sword intent. The lightning phoenix flapped its wings and suddenly changed directions, pouncing straight towards the other practitioners. The sky was filled with lightning pressure, causing everyone to kneel onto the ground. Taking this opportunity, Zhu Yao pulled the girl and madly flew towards the east. Yu Yao, you shouldn't have saved me? Ing Luo suddenly spoke up. Bullshit. Zhu Yao really wanted to turn around and spit on her face. Not caring if she believed it or not, she immediately said it out. This old lady will be honest with you. I'm basically not here for some devil or whatever. This old lady's goal is to save you. The girl was stunned. A long while later, Yu Yao. Amen? As I thought. I'm the one you like, right? Don't force me to kick you down. Zhu Yao madly flew the entire way. In the first place, the spiritual energy in her shattered dantian had already mostly dispersed, and she had even forcefully summoned her sword intent earlier. She felt an unprecedented fatigue, and the spiritual energy in her body was about to reach the bottom. After flying for a while, she passed the task of flying the sword to Ing Luo. However, her speed had evidently slowed down, but fortunately, there were no longer any pursuers behind them. With their speed earlier, it was very hard for the various sects to catch up to them. What's that place in front? Zhu Yao faintly saw a floating mountain in front of her, but she did not know why there wasn't any spiritual energy floating in the surroundings. On top of the mountain, she could faintly see the shape of a palace. It's that ancient ruin. Ing Luo's eyes shone as she explained, it's the one where the devil resided. Let's go in. Zhu Yao immediately made a decision. Not only was the final mystic artifact here, but because of the devil, many practitioners would not recklessly approach it either. Ing Luo naturally understood her intentions, as she immediately flew into that palace on her sword. That palace was extremely huge, and in its surroundings, there were gigantic stone pillars that were at least 3 stories tall. Ing Luo searched for a flat ground before placing her down. She then took out a few energy-replenishing pellets and passed them to her. No need. Zhu Yao shook her head. My dantian has shattered, so medicinal pellets are basically useless. Her hands trembled, and her face instantly paled a little. Yu Yao, it's fine. This isn't the first time my dantian has shattered either. After being shattered for so long, she had already gotten used to it. Zhu Yao looked at her crying face and glared at her. Don't make it look as though I'm about to die. But wouldn't a shattered dantian mean death? Don't worry, I can recover. Zhu Yao took a deep breath, sat down in a lotus position, and casually muttered. I never expected that copper bell to be so incredible either. Yu Yao, I'm sorry. Her expression turned even paler. A moment later, she said, that's a body-locking bell. It's a God's artifact? You know about it? She had a shocked look. Chapter 257. The Truth-Sealing Bell is a divine artifact that can see through any disguise, and it's even able to conceal one's aura. Ing Luo turned to look at her. Her face was filled with guilt. That was originally my weapon, and then you gave it to Ding Chuanxiu? Zhu Yao continued. She lowered her head. That divine artifact has a symbiotic contract with me. I can't use it anymore once I die. I should have known that with my resurrection, the divine artifact would naturally be activated. He must have seen through my identity the first time we met. She said with a hint of self-mockery, back then, I gave him the divine artifact just to protect him from being harmed by scoundrels. I didn't expect that he would use this against me. I've said it before. That guy wasn't a good person. Zhu Yao coldly snorted. Ing Luo smiled bitterly. You're right. Ever since we met, every single thing you've said has come true. Whether it's the reaction of the world, or her voice suddenly became unimaginably deep, as if she had completely lost her vitality. Her eyes were empty, as if she was mumbling to herself, but I never believed it, and I didn't want to believe it. When I was young, I was bullied by others. When I cultivated, I was ostracized by others. When I finally found a home, I was disliked by my elder sister. At that time, I could still tell myself that I had a clear conscience. People who lived in this world were lonely at the beginning, and they would die alone in the end. Thus, even if I had to risk my life to seal the devil race, I would never regret it. But I don't understand. I was the one who saved the world. I don't expect others to be grateful to me, but why do I attract hatred instead? They didn't even give me a chance to explain and directly condemned me. Then what I did, was it right or wrong? I only seek to have a clear conscience. Why is it that others are able to remain calm even though they have clearly done something shameful? Why did I come to this world? She suddenly stopped speaking, and despair slowly seeped out of her eyes. Ingluo. Zhu Yao pressed down on her hand. You still have me. I trust you. She was stunned for a moment before she slowly smiled and nodded heavily. Yes, and you. After a long time, Yu Yao. You really are after my beauty, aren't you? Scram. Aya, just admit it. Although this is against human nature, look, we've already become two rats crossing the street. Why don't we just make do with it? I won't despise you. Do you think I despise you? When you were reincarnated, your mouse shook too much and you chose the wrong gender, didn't you? Mouse? What was that? Really, if you don't choose me, you will be lonely for the rest of your life. I have a man. Get lost. That's impossible. You don't even have breasts. You're the one with no breasts. You're the one with no breasts. Ingluo. Former palace lord, could it be that your sister doesn't like you because you have some improper thoughts about her? Zhu Yao adjusted her breathing for a moment, calmed her heart, and began to meditate to restore her dantian. Taking a deep breath, she slowly released her own sword intent. A white phoenix slowly flew out from her body and spread its huge wings to protect her body. The spiritual energy in her body instantly calmed down. Only then did she guide the spiritual energy to gather at her dantian bit by bit, and then she slowly began to repair it. She used spiritual energy to fill up and flatten the damaged areas. After finally forming an embryonic form, she guided the spiritual energy into it. However, the moment the spiritual energy entered, the dantian that had just been repaired, like a fragile egg, once again shattered. The spiritual energy that she had painstakingly accumulated instantly went out of control and began to scatter around her body. Zhu Yao puked out a mouthful of blood. Yu Yao. Ingluo was startled as she woke up from her meditative state. Her injuries were not light either, yet she could no longer be bothered to treat her injuries. She looked at her with a worried expression. What's wrong? That's impossible. Zhu Yao was frightened by her own situation. Her method wasn't wrong, right? She had completely followed her master's instructions, and it wasn't her first time repairing it either. It was impossible that it couldn't be repaired. But why was the spiritual energy in her body flowing away even faster? The moment the spiritual energy entered her body, it scattered. She once again meditated and tried 2 more times, only to realize that the same situation was happening. Her dantian could not be repaired at all. Zhu Yao was a little confused. My dantian can't be repaired. This wasn't a divine art. Could it be because of that god's artifact? However, she clearly did not sense any abnormalities in her body. Ingluo frowned, as she was unable to think of a solution for a moment. Don't worry, take it slow. It's very safe here. Rest for a moment. Zhu Yao nodded. She tried a few more times, yet the same situation was happening. If this continued, her spiritual energy would only decrease. Right now, she had no choice but to end it as soon as possible. She cast an art to seal a few of her meridians. so that her spiritual energy wouldn't flow away too quickly. Girlie, are your injuries healed yet? They're already 50% healed. She solemnly said. All right, then let us first search for the final mystic artifact. But, your injuries, we'll talk about it after we find it. Zhu Yao stood up and walked towards the depths of the ruins. After pondering for a moment, she took out the metal spirit and had it sense the exact location of the mystic artifact. This time, the metal spirit leaped onto the ground and then rolled in a certain direction. Chick, it found the place. Zhu Yao signaled Ing Luo with her eyes and hurriedly followed after it. The braziers in the surroundings began to light up, illuminating the entire palace. Not far away, a stone door appeared, and it was so tall that the end could not be seen. Yu Yao, these ruins are very dangerous, Ing Luo said with a stern expression. The place behind this door is even more dangerous. Formations will transport people to various terrifying places. Back then, I was transported to a dark forest, and there were countless ferocious beasts inside. It was so terrifying. Zhu Yao's heart could not help but thump. Chick, chick, chick. The metal spirit seemed to have grown impatient from waiting, as it jumped a few times on the ground. No matter what, let us first take a look. Zhu Yao took a step forward and reached out her hand to touch the door. As expected, the teleportation formation next to the door shone brightly. Ing Luo was still endlessly warning her, when Zhu Yao immediately pulled her into the formation, and the scenery in front of her changed. These ruins are very complicated. Though the metal spirit is leading the way, to find that mystic artifact, it definitely won't be that easy. Hey! She suddenly widened her eyes and stared at the pitch-black dagger on the table in front of her. For a moment, she could not find any words. How is this possible? In the past, she had a slim chance of survival when she entered, but this time, putting aside the fact that nothing happened, she even saw a mystic artifact the moment she entered. Yu Yao, I'm not seeing things, right? Zhu Yao did not expect that she would find a mystic artifact so easily either. With a single teleportation, she was transported right in front of the dagger. She was simply too pleasantly surprised. Perhaps, it's because the metal spirit is leading the way. She pointed at a certain rock that had already jumped onto the table and was about to push the dagger off the table. Ing Luo reluctantly accepted this answer. Chick, the metal spirit suddenly called out, and that black dagger flew up. Zhu Yao casually pulled open her storage pouch, yet that dagger paused for a moment before turning around and flying in front of Ing Luo. It can't be, right? The metal spirit has changed its affections so quickly. Chick, it suddenly called out again. 3 mystic artifacts instantly flew out from her storage pouch, and they flew towards Ing Luo as well. Chick, chick, chick. Only then did the metal spirit roll back. As though it had encountered something worth being happy about, it happily circled around her and chirped nonstop. Chick, chick, mistress is mine. Chick, chick, you mystic artifact scram. Chick, chick, Zhu Yao. Ing Luo, who was buried by the mystic artifacts. Girlie, these 4 mystic artifacts, it's best if you keep them. She felt that if she kept them on her, there would be a day when they would be smashed by the metal spirit. Ing Luo nodded, and only then did she keep them. After inspecting her surroundings, she realized that they were in a stone room. At the center, there was only a study table and a chair, and it looked like a study room. The image of a phoenix was faintly engraved on the table. But strangely, there wasn't a single book here. Zhu Yao touched the image on the table and felt that she had seen it somewhere before. Yu Yao, that teleportation formation has already disappeared. How are we going to return? Ing Luo said. Since there's a teleportation formation here, naturally, there's a way out as well. This stone room was not locked, and they immediately walked out to find the exit. Outside was a passageway, and on both sides were several similar stone rooms. Let's look around first. Be careful. After all, this was an ancient ruin, so they could not let their guard down. Zhu Yao immediately had the girl Ing Luo place down a defensive barrier before pushing open the door to the next stone room. Wow, so many clothes! Ing Luo exclaimed and walked in. What entered her eyes were clothes of various colors, and they filled the entire room. Some were neatly stacked in the cupboards, while some were scattered everywhere. It seems like the owner of this ruin is a woman. Zhu Yao nodded. She casually picked up one of them and began to inspect it carefully. The clothes were of various colors, and their figures were about the same as hers. The sleeves were similarly embroidered with the familiar image of a phoenix. Compared to the other clothes, the sleeves were especially small, and the cuffs were sticking to her wrists. This design was a little like her habit. She had always felt that the sleeves of ancient clothes were too much of a hindrance, and were not as convenient as the modern straight sleeves. Hence, every time her master gave her clothes, the cuffs would shrink. A strange feeling flashed in the depths of her heart. She never expected that other than herself, there would be others who had such a habit as well. My girl Yu Yao, come quick. Ing Luo stretched her head out from another stone room and excitedly waved at her. What's wrong? She walked over. The girl pushed her in. Hurry and look. There are so many things of various colors here. Zhu Yao took a look and saw that there were dozens of large chests placed in the room, and they were filled with various types of dried fruits. Most probably because there were preservation formations on the chests, even after so many years, the dried fruits were not affected in the slightest, and were still emitting out an alluring fragrance. It smells so good. Ing Luo wiped away her saliva. I wonder what it is. Dried fruits. Zhu Yao replied. Dried fruits. Ing Luo's eyes shone. Then it's edible? As she said that, she picked up a purple dried fruit and bit down on it. However, she let out a miserable cry. Aya! That dried fruit suddenly ignited with purple flames. Her hand trembled, and she threw it down. Half of her sleeves were burnt away. The girl looked like she was about to cry. What happened to the promise that it's edible? Your method is wrong. Zhu Yao sighed. She stepped forward and picked up one as well. With a forceful pinch, the purple shell shattered, revealing a dark purple kernel within. She then passed it over. The shell of this dried fruit will burn when it comes in contact with water. Only the kernel inside can be eaten. Ing Luo curiously received it. There's actually such a mystical dried fruit. What's it called? Purple flame fruit. Zhu Yao said. Then what about this? She pointed to the chest of snow-white dried fruits at the side. Snow will. She then picked up a red one. What about this? Hong Ru. Whoa. Her face was filled with shock. My girl Yu Yao, you're so amazing. How do you know about it? I've never even seen these dried fruits before. How's that possible? Stop joking. Aren't these usually prepared by the Phoenix race? She paused halfway through her words. She suddenly widened her eyes, and a bold guess suddenly surfaced in the depths of her heart, causing her to be flustered for a moment. There's an especially large chest at the center. Ing Luo held onto a chest with one hand and leaped. As she approached, she said, This chest is so big. I wonder what's inside? Zhu Yao raised her head to look, and as expected, a phoenix with its wings spread out was engraved on the chest as well. However, the beautiful phoenix was missing its tail feathers. In an instant, the answer in the depths of her heart was about to come out. Ing Luo had already opened the lid of the chest, and in an instant, a golden light scattered out from within. Golden seeds of equal size and rotting filled the entire chest. Sunflower seeds, they're golden, Ing Luo exclaimed. Zhu Yao simply felt her breathing tighten, and her legs weakly took 2 steps back. The phoenix's emblem, the clothes with the unique cuffs, and the various dried fruits. The various clues instantly connected together. This ruin. My girl Yu Yao, what's wrong? Seeing her face suddenly turn pale, Ing Luo was startled and immediately crawled out. Have your injuries worsened? I know who the owner of this ruin is. Aya. Ing Luo was a little dumbfounded. Who? Zhu Yao did not answer. She turned around and left the door, heading towards the end of the passage. Yu Yao, wait a moment. Luo chased after her. Yet, the more she ran, the more anxious she became. Waves of heartache emerged from the depths of her heart, along with a slight, uncontrollable panic. She was simply too familiar with those things, to the point where she could guess that they were prepared for her the moment she saw them. And there was only one person who made these things. She ran for exactly 7 minutes, before she reached the deepest part of the palace. In front of her was a stone door that was several tens of meters tall, and on top of the stone door, a gigantic tree was engraved. Its roots touched the ground, and its leaves reached the sky, as though it was connected to the entire heaven and earth. Parasol Tree, the place where the Phoenix clan resided. Yu Yao. Luo chased after her. There's no way out? She carefully looked at the door. There seems to be a word curse on this door, and it can only be opened with a specific incantation. Zhu Yao raised her head to look at that tree. It was both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Heaving a deep sigh, she lightly called out, "Xiao Bai, you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.